Crowd you out here.
Right, I mean, I'm harder to crowd out than now.
I would like to call to order the March 8th, 2011 regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Sandy, would you call the roll, please?
Albright.
Here.
Belville.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Roberge.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I'd like to remind all of who are gathered here today that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to graduate students in the new century who have the knowledge, skills, and personal characteristics that will make this world a safer, more thoughtful, and more inclusive place in which to live. In support of that mission, I would like to begin our first agenda item, the superintendent's report. Dr. King.
Good evening, Mr. President. And tonight I have the privilege of recognizing 5 extraordinary BVSD staff members who will be honored on March 16th as Impact on Education 2011 Impact Award winners. Before I invite the 2011 winners to the podium, I want to once again acknowledge the special place that our primary community partner, Impact on Education, occupies in the hearts and minds of the BVSD community. Whether it is publicly honoring outstanding staff or coordinating the very successful Crayons to Calculators program, Impact is always there for our students and staff. Over the past 27 years, this organization has grown in its support of key programs aiding student learning and staff recognition. Impact on Education now invests annually more than $1 million into BVSD. Please join me in expressing our thanks and gratification to Fran Ryan, the CEO of Impact, and the Board of Impact, and everyone else involved in Impact Services. Thank you. With the following BVSD staff members, please join me at the podium. Mary Campbell, high school counselor, Peak to Peak K-12. We'll just have you hold. Renee Cerny, a kindergarten teacher at Crestview Elementary. Lori Junt Dolan, a BVSD literacy specialist. Lori. And Kathy Zimmerman, a 3rd grade teacher at Heatherwood Elementary. The Impact Awards program, I'm sorry, Maureen Kenny, Principal's Assistant at Ryan Elementary. All right, let's try this again. The Impact Awards program annually recognizes individuals in BVSD who make an extraordinary impact on student learning through exceptional teaching skills, job dedication, and leadership. They will each be honored a week from Wednesday on March 16 in the Glenn Miller Ballroom of the CU University Memorial Center. This has become one of the major events of the school year, and I'm looking forward to being there. Thank you, Mary, Renee, Lori, Maureen, and Kathy for a job well done on behalf of BVSD students. And we have a pin and a certificate for each of you, and I really appreciate your coming, and I look forward to seeing you next week at CU.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. President, later this evening, the board will begin review and study of the BVSD District Improvement Plan. As the board knows, more than 3 years ago, you approved a set of 5-year goals focusing upon the district's performance in the areas of academic achievement, equity, or the achievement gap, and school climate. BVSD has monitored and published reports on our progress toward these goals annually. The current report can be found on the BVSD website and is available in hard copy at every school and administration building. In 2010, the Colorado Department of Education, CDE, introduced a unified plan template and guidelines for school districts intended to meet all legally mandated plan requirements for state accreditation. This CDE unified plan requires that districts study and analyze their data, assign root causes to areas of deficiency, prioritize needs, establish annual performance goals or targets for key measures, and create an action plan detailing the strategies and activities to be taken in order to improve student achievement. BVSD has incorporated its own 5-year board goals into the unified plan template to create a comprehensive document addressing existing and new requirements. I look forward to tonight's discussion because I believe it will focus each of us on the work that is at the core of our mission of educating our children. It's through this work that we realize the BVSD's community's New Century Vision statement of graduating students who have the knowledge, skills, and personal characteristics that will make this world a safer, more thoughtful, and inclusive place in which to live. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. So tonight we have no student communication. So the next agenda item is a public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, number one, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, and there are only agenda item speakers today, followed by those speaking on non-agenda items if we had any. Limit your presentation, please, to 2 minutes. If you have been given 2 minutes from another person, you may speak for 4 minutes. That's the maximum. Please recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. In order to help with the timing, there's a series of lights on the podium. They will turn green at the beginning of your presentation. I believe it's, is it 30 seconds, Sandy? That will turn orange when you have 30 seconds left, and then it will turn red and beep. When that happens, please summarize your remarks, and so that we may hear from the next speaker. Board members will not answer questions nor comment on items that are raised in public participation. However, we often will address those issues at the board communication part of our agenda that immediately follows public participation. So you may want to stay around in case board members do want to comment. So tonight we have speakers on agenda items only. The first speaker is Greg Holland. He will have 4 minutes. 2 minutes from Tracy Brennan. Greg?
Mr. President and to the board, my name is Greg Holland. I'm a business teacher from the district. We are grateful that the school board has been reaching out to the teachers and community to elicit ideas regarding what we'd like to see in the new superintendent. We would like just to offer some added input. Even though our resources for communication were limited, we have We had just a few days. We were able to gather over 160 signatures from staff from 5 high schools and 2 middle schools. The signatures are mostly teachers, but include non-staff as well. And so the letter goes, as we at the Underside teachers in the Boulder Valley District believe that the current situation warrants an authentic national search for a new superintendent. If a suitable candidate is not available, this might mean that an interim superintendent is appointed for the following year. Many of us are taxpayers in the district, also parents that have children attending BVSD schools. Therefore, our interests are as citizens and parents, as well as employees. Parents do not have time to oversee every aspect of their children's education, so they count on schools to provide what is needed and trust that the district will rely on data and principles when making decisions. In order for us to foster this trust, the new superintendent must commit to being accountable in the following areas. We have 4 of them. So the first one is financial accountability. The new superintendent should pledge that the district will follow modern accounting practices to help manage the numerous financial responsibilities. The superintendent should bring back the position of COO, or Chief Financial Officer, to oversee district spending. The COO would structure the financial reports to track expenditures versus the budget on a monthly basis. This is standard practice in the private sector, as most know. When BVSD has a COO, the difference between what is budgeted and what was spent was managed closely, and there were no pots of unmonitored funds. The superintendent must also work with the administration and the school board to ensure that when budgets must be cut, maintaining direct funding to the classroom is the priority. 2 of 4 here we have staff respect and accountability. The new superintendent must work to end the adversarial relationship between central administration and school-based staff. Excuse me. Well-managed companies in the private sector treat employees as valuable instruments, or I should say, valuable investments and partners in success. This requires genuine communication between the district staff and community to restore these groups, rather than meetings calling for input that seems to be ignored. In the aftermath of the Senate Bill 191, it is critical to develop effective means of hiring and retaining quality teachers, and to devise and implement a comprehensive teacher evaluation plan that does not rely solely on test scores. 3 of 4, program accountability. The new superintendent must work effectively to expand education opportunities for all students, regardless of achievement levels. Eliminating D's and F does not improve learning. It only creates grade inflation, especially at the secondary level. And every special program has the potential to draw money away from the regular classroom, leading to increased class size and the problems associated with overloading a classroom. Programs to support student learning must be evaluated regularly for effectiveness. The evaluation process must include teacher input, since they are the ones who are most involved with programs on a daily basis, and ineffective programs must be terminated. And so lastly, district accountability. The superintendent must participate in benchmarking programs that compare the best run districts in the state and the nation, and from data from benchmarking supports inform decision-making processes. So these are the elements that we wanted to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rick Brennan, who will have 2 minutes. Mr. Brennan.
Evening. In the work that our parents and taxpayer and teacher group has done over the last year, we did a fair amount of research, and it included some research with talking to our principals. And we were actually kind of surprised that we got a consistent feedback from principals that said that when Robert Hammond left the district, that he left a big hole, both personally and in terms of a role. Robert was the COO in the previous structure. As we look forward for a new superintendent, the input that you're getting is that we want a strong, inspirational leader, someone that can take us forward. And I think we have to be careful about burdening that inspirational leader with a lot of the details of running a very large, very complex organization. The COO position is a critical one. It's a critical one in almost every organization of the size of the Boulder Valley School District. And a superintendent that doesn't have that kind of a position behind him is going to be limited in their ability to be that strong, inspirational leader.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Cammie Wickham, who will have 2 minutes.
Hi. Recently, there was an article written by Bill Gates entitled Smarter School Reform. In this article, he states, "We know that of all the variables under a school's control, the single most decisive factor in student achievement is excellent teaching. It is astonishing what great teachers can do for their students." That was his quote, sorry. At present, many school-based staff do not feel that it is safe to share their opinions with central administration. We also feel that we do not have a genuine voice in the district. Our greatest hope is that the new superintendent will recognize that the district administration exists to support the teachers instead of the reverse model, which results in top-down management. A good leader is a good listener, and the new superintendent needs to value and honor the thoughts of the teachers and school-based staff. As a result, the new superintendent should set up a system that will give the staff a means of giving valuable feedback regarding every operation of our district. In the process of listening, it is critical that the new superintendent creates a non-political atmosphere where independent thought is encouraged and valued, and teachers, counselors, and principals feel safe when voicing views different from the district. One of the qualities we would like to see in a superintendent is being genuinely respectful of the school-based staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Dan Winters. Dan, are you here? Okay. And finally, Ann Guilfoyle.
Good evening. I have a couple comments also about the qualities of this superintendent, and they are focused on the diversity issues. And I think that first to say that the district has made tremendous progress towards inclusiveness and honoring diversity, and I would like to see that continue and move forward. The very last item on this list is a list that's basically from the non-discrimination policy, but it omits part of the non-discrimination policy, which was amended in May of 2007, I think it was. That includes gender identity and gender expression. So I would like to ask that you please add that to the list. And the second thing is that a number of statements have to do with understanding and respecting and valuing, and I would like to see something much more assertive than that. Something along the lines demonstrates the ability to improve school climate, for example, not just honors and etc. That is someone who is actively assuring the implementation of the non-discrimination policy or dedicated to consistently implementing it, something along those lines. On the last round, HYA brought a candidate who, when asked a question about LGBT issues, said, "I live near Hollywood." Now, I don't think that this district should start with that. I think we have so much going on here that is so good that we better start with HYA screening someone like that out of the finalist pool. That's all.
Thank you. So Dan Winters, is Dan here? Okay. So that concludes public participation. Thank you all for coming out tonight and spending your time with us. We really do value hearing from our community. So the next agenda item is board communication. Who would like to start tonight? Helene.
Thank you. I have a couple quick things. The first is that I'd like to thank the members of our school district who attended a day-long work session that was hosted by the Colorado Legacy Foundation looking at expanded learning opportunities. 4 school districts were invited to attend, and the Boulder Valley School District sent a team of 15 people who took a day to learn and work together, and it was just really wonderful to have all of you there, not only just physically there, but the level of engagement and the interest was really wonderful, and I thank you all for attending and hope that you all got something out of it in return. So thank you for that. The second item is I find it just fascinating, having read the Bill Gates editorial when it did appear, that this would be the editorial that's brought forward tonight. And I'd just like to reinforce that Senate Bill 191 and the implementation of Senate Bill 191 actually completely lines up with everything that Bill Gates suggests. And some of the things he suggests is that we look at different ways to measure, develop, and reward excellent teaching, that we have to identify great teachers, and we should measure great teachers and teacher effectiveness that are tied to gains in student achievement, that we shouldn't just assume seniority has an effect on student achievement, and actually look at systems that reward teachers financially for good performance. All of this is in line with the recommendations that will come forward from the State Council on Educator Effectiveness. An interesting thing that is in this editorial that has never been discussed, but I find it fascinating given the other input we've received in this district, is the proposition that the top 25% of teachers should be asked to take on 4 or 5 more students. It actually is, in effect, a move to increase class size, that an effective teacher can handle more students effectively. Given the amount of pushback we consistently get about class size in this district, I find it interesting that this editorial should be brought forward. But I'm thrilled to hear that there are people in this district that support the implementation of 191. The tools that are discussed in this editorial are actually being used in Colorado. You might not be aware that the Gates Foundation has decided to make a significant investment in the state of Colorado to ensure the successful implementation of Senate Bill 191. So I think it's wonderful that you've brought this forth. I only find it rather unfortunate that we are not, as a school district, engaged, as so many other districts are in this state, in conversations about how to implement 191. In this district, it doesn't seem like we have a relationship with our association that allows us to be looking at these issues proactively, and instead we'll have a situation where we will feel like this has been done to us because we have not been involved in productive conversation. And for that, I actually think is really unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the students, and it's unfortunate for the teachers who, if they feel this way, should let their association know that they would like to be engaged in constructive dialogue around the implementation of the recommendations of Senate Bill 191. That is happening in other school districts. It's unfortunate that it isn't happening here. The second point I'd like to make is in response to the comments about Chief Operating Officer. I believe that Robert Hammond did an excellent job for this district, and I was very sorry to see him go, and I think it's great the job he is doing at the state level as commissioner. You may or may not be aware that our superintendent is evaluated annually, and part of that evaluation is financial and fiduciary responsibility, how well he has managed the assets of the district. The board does not dictate to the superintendent the structure of an organization, but rather we evaluate the superintendent based on performance. I would not at all be upset if we hired a superintendent that decided that because of their strengths they wanted a chief operating officer, but I do not think it is the role of the board to actually dictate what the organizational structure would be. Rather, we should put in place strong goals that holds our superintendent accountable, as we have done for the last 5 years with our current superintendent. I want to thank you for caring enough to come out tonight and share your feedback, and I want to thank everybody who came forward 2 weekends ago to share their feedback and the 1,400 or 1,500 people who responded to the survey. All of your input has been, I have read all of the input that we've received, and I know that all of my colleagues have done the same. Thank you.
Next. Leslie.
Well, speaking about the Council for Teacher Effectiveness, we all got an email regarding the survey that they would like us to participate in. And so over the weekend, I opened up the link, and it's actually very well done. There's a little 7-minute movie updating on what their plans are, what they hope to achieve, and then afterwards there's a Survey Monkey survey. So I think it would be good for all of us to participate in the survey, because I think you'll learn a lot about what's going on in addition to getting the email updates as they get together and meet. Let's see, yesterday Chris and I toured Monarch, which I had never seen the whole campus, and
High school.
Monarch High School, yes, thank you. And while we were there, Kristen Donnelly called us in and showed us the 3D goggles. They're part of a pilot in Colorado, and I think Casey might be the other school, I can't remember, but there's 2 schools in Boulder Valley that are participating in this 3D pilot, and it's pretty neat. They have a projector, and they were talking about molecular structures and DNA yesterday, and so you can actually pop these goggles on, and the projector shows the molecular structure in 3D, and you can see the enzymes latching on and so forth. So they're piloting that just to see if student learning is that much more effective with the 3D curriculum. So I was excited to see that. A few weeks ago, I got to visit Columbine with Sandy, and I was very impressed with Guillermo's ideas about moving the school forward and closing the achievement gap. We sat down and looked at data charts that is developed for each teacher with goals both in English acquisition and Spanish acquisition, and seeing if the goals are met, and talking about how, perhaps one teacher is meeting the goals and another isn't, and how teachers can be moved along on that continuum of excellence. So I think I was very impressed, and he's got so much passion and believes so strongly that every child can learn and learn at a very high level, and I was very impressed with his belief system on student achievement. And then finally, I just want to say I've been very wrapped up in basketball. March Madness is here. And I want to congratulate the Broomfield High School girls 4A team and the Boulder High 5A team, both winning their brackets. The girls play tomorrow night at CU at 5:30, and the boys play Thursday at 8:30. I hope that people show their spirit for Boulder Valley schools, and I wish them luck. Thank you.
Jenny?
Well, last week, Lori and Ken and I attended the CASB, Colorado Association of School Boards annual legislative conference, and it was very informative. I'll leave. Oh, I'm not on, am I? I'll leave. I'm sure Lori and Ken will have other things to say about it, but I'd like to say that the keynote was Jamie Vollmer, and he talked a lot about the need for extra time in our schools, which I thought was interesting, and something that concerns me a little bit too. I think that seat time. I'm glad that we're making progress toward that with extending our kindergarten to full day in some of our schools next year, notably Emerald, and I think that that's something that deserves looking at into the future. Let's see, and I think we also need to thank CASB and our own legislative crew for the hard work they've done keeping on top of bills at the legislature this year. I know it's been a real concern with in fact cuts coming from the state, to make sure that bills that there are no bills passed that put extra requirements on the school district in times when we're cutting budgets. And I think both our own staff and lobbyists and CASB itself has done a good job of keeping on top of those bills and getting them amended or killed if they were going to be detrimental to schools. Let's see. And I'd like to say that I'm concerned. I've got a couple of comments about educator effectiveness. I'm going to be going to the state conversation at the Jefferson County School Board room tomorrow night at the stakeholder conference, and sort of participate in that discussion that way. And I think that we're still planning to get together with the BVEA. Which you're going to speak to, and I'm hoping that we'll post. I've had a couple of people say to me that they're really interested in attending that workshop just to hear the conversation. So I hope we'll post the date of that as soon as we know when it is, so that people who are, because it is something that a lot of people are interested in, and so I hope that we'll do that. Let's see. This last week or so, I attended both the district science fair and the History Day. And they're both very, very cool things. In fact, I bet you all are really jealous of my pen that I got at the science fair. Lights up. And there were just some amazing projects, both places. It kind of brought tears to my eyes. And it's the kind of thing that I wish more of our students could participate in. So I was really glad, especially at the science fair, to see that Kristen Donnelly, whose name's come up twice, was leading a conversation with a group of teachers from other middle schools and high schools about how to get students involved in science fair. I'm really glad to see that we're making every effort to expand student participation in that. And I had some really good conversations with teachers at the History Day about how to expand that as well, because I think those two exercises are things that really increase develop the kinds of skills in kids that we really want, the critical thinking kinds of skills that we really want to develop in all of our kids, and I think all of our kids is sort of the operative word there. I also toured Boulder Prep with Ellen Miller Brown. She'd been promising me since last spring that when I went to the graduation there, that we would go, and I was really impressed with the work that goes on there. That's a really amazing program that does a good job providing academic success for students who haven't experienced that success in some of our more general high schools in our district. And they were really generous with their time. I think we spent an hour and a half there, and I think we could have stayed longer had we wanted to. And just the stories that we heard and the activity that we saw going on was just inspirational. So I'd like to publicly recognize Boulder Prep for the great work they're doing with our kids. And I'd like to actually also recognize the kids for the great work they're doing, because it's not that we're doing something to kids. They're doing really hard work, and I think they're kind of heroes. I think. And I'd also like, back to the CASB thing, I'd also like to one more time thank our public for 3A, because one of the carry-away messages I took from CASB was that we are in such better shape than many surrounding school districts, almost every other school district in the state. We're going to be kind of holding steady this next budget year, and so many states are making really painful, difficult cuts, and many of them don't even have the capability to raise their their revenue the way we've been able to. So I'd like to thank our public again that we're able to do a better job of taking care of our kids than many districts throughout the state.
Just keep going down the line. Jim.
So I'd like to thank Helene and Jenny for their support of working together with BVA on Senate Bill 191. We have been planning on having a joint work session with BVA as exec board for some time now, and in a moment of cultural incompetence, we scheduled with them a day that we've asked schools not to schedule events on. So we are working hard with them to see if they have additional time this spring to meet with us, and I'm hopeful that they will. But that is on our side, that we were not able to make that happen just yet. I would like to thank the members of the community for bringing forward a nice list, a nice punch list of what they would like to see in the next superintendent. I think in many things I saw on here, I was underlining the things that just off the top of my head, I don't know that we covered as completely in the online survey. And so it's good to see those additional details. There were plenty of comments off the online survey, but this kind of really sums it up for me. the school district is the second largest business in the county. Certainly its operations affect so many people from a business standpoint, from an education standpoint, and getting everybody's input on what the next superintendent needs as characteristics is key for us, and I appreciate you all coming and talking to us tonight. And Ann, thank you. I'll bring that back up again when we get to our the leadership profile. Thanks.
Lori?
Thanks. Many of the things I was going to talk about have already been discussed or brought up, so I'm just going to piggyback on what everybody said. I actually went also to the science fair and to the National History Day in the last 2 weeks. I was very impressed with the quality and the quantity of work that our students are doing. Thanks to our teachers for good leadership and good mentoring and helping these students bring forward very remarkable projects. I even saw your son's project there. It was beautiful. I mean, it was gorgeous colors. One thing I would like to investigate a little bit further is how we support our students who achieve really high in our district at these competitions, how we help them get to the next level, how they get to, how we actually fund them and pay them to go to both the National History Day and to the Science Fair international competitions. I don't know if you know
RFI
it.
would probably be best. Jennifer Barr deals with those competitions out of her office. I'm sure we could do an RFI.
Great, that would be great. I just want to know that when our young students have put in the time and the effort and have won these prizes, that they're able to go on and not be limited. I heard it was about $200 for students, which doesn't go very far when we're talking about playing fair. I just would like to know what the situation is. And as Jenny was saying, we also talked with some teachers about actually using some of that information as part of the assessments for effective teachers, teacher effectiveness, and trying to think about how those kinds of examples are perfect examples for what teachers are able to do with kids. So, we're seeing some kind of creative thinking out there, and it was great to talk with those really enthusiastic teachers. I also attended a parent discussion at Fairview put on by Penn of the Race to Nowhere, and it was an interesting discussion with parents thinking about the pressures that their children are under, and I think it's instructive for us to think about how we, as a community, can help our young people not get overloaded and get too crazy in competition or in struggles to get ahead, yet at the same time wanting to encourage those students who really are on that track. It's an interesting discussion that I think is relevant for every family and every student. As Jenny mentioned, I think as Leslie mentioned, she went to Columbine, and I have to say I was very impressed. I appreciated at a recent meeting that we were invited to come out to Columbine by teachers, and Jenny and I went with Sandy. I have to remember where we were that day. And I was very impressed with the kind of data that's being collected and the kind of interventions that teachers are now doing with individual students based on exactly where they are. It was a great model. I was very impressed with all of the paperwork and reporting and spreadsheets of where students are. I was also going to talk about the CASB conference, and I was going to talk about an idea that was brought up there that I would like to talk about at some point, and maybe we can talk about it even as an agenda-setting topic. But the speaker there talked about how much time we have with young people. And one thing he said was that if a school board isn't considered the amount of time a student has to learn the concepts in each grade, we haven't looked at each option to increase student achievement or to close the achievement gap. And so the idea is sort of a balance. It's a values question, and I don't know how I would come down, but I'd like to explore it. We think a lot about class size and how and that's an important driving factor, and at the same time we think about how long children are in school. And so I would just like to think about at some point the weighing of those two values and seeing if there might be a way to this might be heresy, but increase class size with the thought of extending either the day or the school year, particularly for students who might be needy. So it's just trying to think about this question about time. I know we have limited resources, but it is something I would like to talk about. And last week I attended a meeting in Denver at the state capitol, put on by economists from Denver University who talked about the financial situation in our state. And what they said was very troubling. They said that over the next many years, most of the extra money in our state will go to education, Medicare, and corrections, to prisons. That we are on such a target with those three areas that there will be little money for anything else. And so given that reality, I just think it's incumbent on us as we're thinking about our own budget to know that the state is in a difficult situation financially unless there is a different source of revenue. And I was heartened last week to see that our Senator Raleigh Heath in District 18, which includes a lot of Boulder Valley School District, has proposed a citizens initiative to increase taxes up to where we were in 1999 before we implemented all of these large tax breaks in our community for individual and corporate taxes. And so it's something I think we should keep an eye on over the next couple of weeks to see when that campaign might kick off and see if we would like to support those efforts, either certainly at least individually. And I was also going to say that I see BVA members in the back that we've been talking about having a work session. It was scheduled for next month, as Jim mentioned, and we would like to move it to a later time that would be convenient for all of us. And thank you for your input in terms of planning that meeting and thinking about speakers, because it is an important conversation that we have together about how we'll work on this. So we'll be in touch. So thank you. That's it.
Tom.
So thanks, Lori, about mentioning my son.
Oh, yeah.
Since you brought up the topic, I'll put in a little plug here. He actually won the Intel Award for computer science at the science fair.
Congratulations.
And which was great for our family. I got to see it from a little bit different perspective in that I had to be up there at 6:30 that morning hauling all the stuff in and helping get set up and seeing all the students haul and put things in the, but the comment was, it's so exciting for all of them. They're very excited, they're very proud of the work they've done. They're very happy to tell everyone about what they've done, and it's just a great opportunity. And I would like to encourage more students, especially high school students, because historically, at least what I've noticed is that we get the younger kids in elementary and we get very high participation, and the numbers dwindle as they go on up into high school. But then I'm really happy to see that the high school kids take on some amazing projects. I mean, really college type of work, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for those kids. For my son, he met a professor there at CU in the computer science department that is now meeting with him once a week to study computer systems and programming, just to work with him, which he obviously was really excited about. But those kind of opportunities, lend themselves when the kids actually put themselves out there a bit. And so, these kind of things are just fantastic. And I'd encourage, hopefully, parents to encourage your kids to do it. It becomes more difficult, I know, as get to the high school years, but it is well worth the effort. The second thing I want to talk about is back to, defining the leadership profile here for our superintendent that we'll give to the search firm to start the screening process. Spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks on this. I attended 2 of the sessions. I think most of us attended 2 of the sessions. I was both discouraged and encouraged by what we've seen. I was discouraged in that I was sad we didn't get some more participation in some of these sessions. I mean, we had in some of them just a handful of people. Fairview was relatively good. I was there. We probably had 30 or 35. You were there, Lori. And we had a broad range of parents and teachers and community members. So I thought we got a pretty good cross-section there. The online response was great to the survey that we had there. About almost 1,400 people responded to that. And out of that, I think we had over 400 people that left comments. And that's what was actually the most valuable for me, is the reading through those comments. It was 24 pages of 10-point font worth of comments. So there's a lot of stuff. I know you guys have all read through that. And I spent a lot of time digging through that. And a couple of things I noticed. First of all, if you look at the broad gamut of things, you get people that are 180 degrees out of phase with each other, But then as you read through them, you start to see some common themes starting to build up. And we're going to be talking about that tonight, so I'll wait for that to talk anymore. But that was the part that really encouraged me, is that we did get such a good wealth of comments, of things that people said, here's what I'm interested in. We had nearly 1,000 parents, respond to that survey. Here's what I'm seeing, here's what I want. So, I'm looking forward to our discussion on profile. And I'm also pleased about the emails. I've gotten a number of emails on input, and thanks, guys, for all coming and talking tonight. This is all very valuable information. And, just one comment is that, this profile, it's like the survey. You read the survey and you say, everything there is a good thing. Everything on there is a good thing. And so there's a lot of good things that we want to look for in a superintendent, but we can't put all of them down. So we have to limit this to what the way I interpret it is the way the things that we say that we have challenges now in our district. That's the way I've been going at it. What are the challenges that we have now, and what characteristics and qualities are we looking for that come in and address these challenges? That doesn't mean that things that don't get on there aren't important. In fact, there's a lot of things that we looked for before, and I think we've done great work with the district in moving forward. And so some of those things, I will leave off of what I'd like to see on the profile, because I think we're doing a great job, and we still have staff in place and the structure in the place, and I fully intend and believe we'll continue doing a good job. So I don't necessarily think we'll need somebody with that particular strength for those areas that we're doing good. I'm looking for the strengths of those where we have challenges. So.
Thank you. Let's see, I'm trying to think of all the things that were not said already, so I don't keep adding on to what has already been eloquently said. Just one mention of History Day. One of the things I want to point out about that particular competition, I'm kind of a big fan of History Day, and one of the things I really like about it is not only does it get students interested in researching our past and becoming skilled in good historical research, but also a very big part of that competition is also in communication. To me, history is a lot about telling our stories, and it's not enough for one person to know that story. In many cultures, there are people who essentially spend their lives learning the stories and telling the stories. And one of the sort of unique aspects of History Day is that for most of the divisions in that competition, students are required to not only do good research, but tell a coherent, convincing story to other people and really make history come alive. And I think communication is a very important skill that we want our children, if we're going to have 21st century graduates. We spend a lot of time on writing, but there are other forms of communication. There's video production and slideshows and graphic art and all kinds of other things. And all of those things kind of come together in History Day. So just a little bit of a broader perspective on that particular competition. I do want to thank all the people who came out for the community engagement sessions. While perhaps we were a little disappointed in some of the sessions, if you look at the total amount of information that we got, it was right. It was really quite a few people, either through the survey. It was 2,000 people who all in all gave us some information about all of this. The data was good. It was interesting. It wasn't the only thing that we go by. There were, I actually totaled them up. We received something like over 600 comments, written comments through all of the various forums. And it sounds like from the comments that were made tonight, we've all read through all of them, and they're really interesting. And in that regard, I want to make sure that people understand, at least the last time I was involved in a superintendent search, what I learned from that and what I intend to learn from this search lasted well beyond the selection of the superintendent. The questions that we asked about the strengths of the district, our biggest challenges, the kind of open-ended input that we got, go well beyond the superintendent per se, and really go into the overall leadership, management, vision of the district. So to those of you who think this is going to be sort of balled up into the leadership profile and then forgotten, at least in my case, I can assure you that much of what we learned through this whole process will guide our board work for years to come. So thank you very much for all coming out and giving us that input. I think we've covered pretty much. Oh, and one last thing. The other thing I want to make sure that none of us forget in terms of our superintendent search is we also have the 3 district goals. And we also have a policy which the board has recently updated, which deals with the superintendent responsibilities. And while we put a lot of emphasis in the last couple of weeks on the community engagement part of this, there's also some other things that are very, very important to us that we have spent many, many months of board work in putting together, and that are the achievement, equity, and climate goals, and our policy for the superintendent job description. So as we go through tonight, and I won't speak any more to this until that agenda item, but as we go through tonight, I also want to make sure that everybody understands that there's other things that we use to guide us in this. And those things as well, particularly the district goals, also involved a lot of thought, a lot of input from administrators, community members, and board members over the years. So with that, I will say thank you. And thank you all for coming out tonight. I agree with many of the things in terms of the 4 accountability areas. Absolutely. I can't always perhaps agree with some of the details that are in here, but certainly the kinds of accountability you have outlined are extremely important to all of us. And we will make sure that not only in the selection of the superintendent, but in our policies and our reviews of the district as we go forward, we will consider all of these. So thank you. Okay, with that, we go on to our first information item, which tonight is an update on collaboration time.
Sandy and Ellen have been working very closely with schools on this for a number of months, and I get briefed on it weekly, and it changes weekly. So it's kind of a point in time of this process, but hopefully we'll answer a lot of the questions that you have about where we're headed with this. Ellen?
Good evening, can you hear me? Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, and Dr. King. You were just talking about the board goals. And so on May 11th, 2010, you took one of our recommendations from the DLT to look at collaboration time as one of the ways that we could try to achieve the closing of the achievement gap. And so we have embarked on that since that time. And I think where we are now, we'll talk a little bit about our journey to date, a little bit about the process so far and the current situation. I will, and then Sandy will talk a little bit about the next steps. So, so far, we have asked people to submit their schedules and their waiver requests by February 28th, And most people did that. The staffs in each of our schools have worked really diligently on this. It's been a struggle for some staffs. It's been a little bit easier for other staffs. I think if you've had a lot of collaboration time, this might have been a little easier for you. But nevertheless, everyone is, I think, in a good faith effort, really looking at how to best find time to collaborate and work toward greater student learning. So as the waiver requests have come in, Sandy, Vaughn, Deirdre, Becky McClure, Chris, and I have all met, and we've evaluated each one of the waiver requests and then sent out our decision about whether or not we would accept them or deny them or ask them to refine them. And then all of that was sent out to all the principals and the BVEA. So currently, we've been working a lot of time on the logistics about when this will occur, how much time, who will be taking part in it. And eventually, what we're hoping to get to, what Sandy will talk about, is the real meat of the matter, which is discussion of what will actually be talked about and worked on in those sessions. So we've had these waiver requests, and they've gone out publicly. So many of the schools, we counted, we think that there were about 7 schools that were remaining to make their decision about when the collaboration time would occur. But as they started looking at the waiver request that had been approved, they got more ideas, better ideas, and so some of those same people may be going back to the drawing board and changing their ideas about their waiver request times. So at this time, we think that about 45 schools are pretty much set, but as I say, there may be a little bit of flux in that. The majority of the schools have decided that they will do either a late start or a beyond the school time day, the student instructional day, which we're calling option C. I think only maybe 3 schools are doing early release. So we're continuing to meet and discuss the waiver requests. We're continuing to meet and work with Bob Young about transportation, because some of the issues, some of the requests that people have brought forward to us have been dependent on transportation. And it costs, we found out, to change a bus route, it costs $30 per bus per day. So that's pretty limiting. So we're trying to see what we can do to tweak the system so that we can do some changes in bus transportation, but probably not system-wide at this time. And then finally, in our update, our current update, we were talking the other day, all of us who were sitting in the room, and we feel that while we have compromised on some of the parameters that we had, that Sandy and her teacher team had set aside as really underpinning best practices for collaboration time, we don't feel that we've compromised on the quality that will eventually take place next year. We're in the midst of a transition. Adam Fels called it today maybe one of the biggest system-wide transitions that we've ever had in this district. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but it is for our staff. And so we're in the midst of a transition. We're in an evolution. We're not going to have everything look exactly the same for every unique school. It'll be something that evolves over time, and eventually we'll probably get to something that is a little more in line with the original parameters that we designed for our staffs. And so Sandy, talk with you about next steps. Where do we go from here?
So good evening. It's good to be here. We have 4 next steps at this point. There could be more that come up later, but that's where our focus is right now. So we're at the point, as Ellen said, we have about 7 schools that are not quite there, have not decided what they want to do, or are still meeting some challenges. So our work really now is a school-by-school basis, where we'll go in and chat with them, or we'll just do some coaching, give them some ideas. A lot of the schools are getting their best ideas right now by listening to other schools on what they've done, and where we've provided waivers that help them to think a little bit differently, that's kind of helping them to see some new ways to move forward. So it's school by school at this point for those who haven't yet made their decisions. The big one still, as Ellen also said, is transportation. So today, for instance, we had a meeting with a group of schools that fit into one busing area, and those are not always feeder systems. But most of these schools were in the Superior Louisville area today, because if one school makes a decision that's a late start, that requires some changes from the other schools in order to make that busing more of a neutral cost rather than an increase. So we're really working with Bob Young. He's been very cooperative and helpful and doing everything he can to make this work for us. So we appreciate that. So those were the first two. Our third next step is to consult with others. Our last parameter, which is probably our first parameter, should be begin with the end in mind, is when we finally get to doing this work next year, how will we know it's making a difference? What difference do we expect it to make? What differences have we seen from the current schools, and what evaluation tool can we use in our schools, first of all, to make sure that it's working for teachers, that it's effective, and that they're getting something out of it, and then second of all, some kind of norming on what is really going well so we can share practices with other schools and really get a good sense of how this is happening across the district. If schools aren't, if the time isn't working well for them, we know it's going to be really hard to get it going. But we saw at Creekside that the first month or two were really rocky, and that they kept asking questions and worked to get it better, and they've really got a very effective system working there now. So we're going to kind of listen to what's happened and, again, help schools through that. And our fourth step to that end is to really provide professional development for our principals on what has been working well, on what research tells us, best practices. We have this book, Learning by Doing, by the DeFores, and they are the ones who have developed the traditional professional learning communities work. While some of our schools are using that now and feel that it is the only way to do it, we know that there will be other ideas out there from teachers, and the idea here is to have them design what works best for them at their schools. So we'll watch schools do that, but ultimately we really want them all to be successful for what happens during that time, now that we're finally getting to the point where we have the time for next year. So those are our next steps, and at this point we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members? Lori?
Sure. I've got a couple of questions. And let me just start with, could you just give me a definition? What's a waiver mean?
A waiver really,
by waiver?
Thank you. As we started, we had parameters in place where we sent all schools parameters, and this is what it should look like. And if schools had an idea that didn't necessarily fit all of our parameters, they asked for a waiver to one or two of those parameters. So that's, let me give you an example of one that probably is happening to the greatest degree. The range of time for collaboration should be 55 to 90 minutes, for instance. There have been some changes or some suggestions about different kinds of time that would work for the schools. Another one was that it should...
More time or less time, or spread over 3 days, or...
Yes,
not
all
at
of
all,
the
or-
above. All of the above.
okay,
We've
okay.
had lots of different ideas come forward. Another one was that it should be, that it should include the entire staff when possible. And while the idea behind collaboration time is to have all staff available at the same time, our meeting schools halfway point this year was that a number of schools have some kind of collaboration time happening now, usually amongst grade level teams. And so we tried to look at that time, and then they might request that instead of doing collaboration time in addition to that 4 times a month or once every week, that they do it twice a month or every other week. And that's where we've said, yes, we'll accept that. So that's probably our biggest waiver is that one. Moving from every week after school or during school time with all teachers available to acknowledging that grade level teams are also a really important way to collaborate, as long as schools have at least 2 opportunities a month where all teachers are available to collaborate at the same time.
Okay.
Or all staff.
Or all,
All staff, like school site.
I was really glad to hear that you're thinking about setting up some metrics or strategies to figure out whether this works or not. We've had some schools who've been doing collaboration time for a long time. How have we measured them, and what data? I'm just curious about what data we have to show that our schools have worked. It's worked well in the schools where we already are implementing this.
Well-
And part of that is a feeling that I have that it's real important to be data driven. I'm happy to do this, but I want to know that there's data out there that shows that the way we've done this has been effective before we do this system-wide change that Adam Fells was talking about.
well, and I think, to be honest, this has been school by school. And for instance, Manhattan, who's been doing it for many, many years, most of their data would be anecdotal, I believe. We weren't at that point looking at metrics. Now, promising from my point of view is what Creekside's been doing. Creekside took on the collaboration time for the first time last year, but they also started co-teaching at the same time, a little bit of co-teaching. So while they showed some great growth in writing, which was their goal area last year, it's hard to know what we can actually attribute that to. So we're going to have to continue to get better at that and look at what our indicators are. And hopefully, though, with Creekside doing both their professional learning communities time, and their official model is that they focus on what students are learning, how teachers know they're learning it, what they're doing if they're not learning, and what they do really if they need extensions of their learning. So those are a professional learning communities model by Rick DeFore, and those are the questions that are driving the work at Creekside. So this year, with that, along with co-teaching, we are hoping to see continued growth or even more growth, and we'll have to just look for it. It hasn't been as direct as we're hoping it will be now, when all schools are doing it together.
Okay. I've got more, but let's let
Okay,
someone
let's-
else
Okay.
have a shot.
Leslie.
It was interesting being involved with the community engagement because, as Tom said, we could get diametrically opposed opinions stated. And there was one that I think relates to this is some people would like more direction from the leadership here, while other people really value site-based and sort of independence. And I sort of think with this being a system-wide transition and looking at the issues with transportation and some of the emails we've gotten from parents just looking at different times for collaboration and feeder schools and trying to juggle kids at elementary, middle, and high. Why didn't we just say we're going to do it Wednesday mornings?
Well, I think we can probably both. It's funny, Sandy and I have worked on this so much, it's almost like we can read each other's thoughts, or I'll start the sentence and she'll finish it. In the negotiated agreement, there are many things that need to be considered as under shared decision-making, and this is one of them. So we're really honoring the contract. We know that you wanted us to entertain this important initiative to close the achievement gap. So we're going about but how it's done, really we wanted to leave it up to the staffs. And we gave them the parameters for collaboration time, which were generated by teachers, even some of the teachers that were here tonight. But we knew that not every staff would be ready for all of them. And as we've said, this is an evolution. We are transitioning into something in 3 years. Watch. Who knows, maybe we'll all be doing much more similar things. But for right now, we wanted to leave it up to the staffs to put their own fingerprints on it and make it something that they could buy into, they could believe in, and have it work for their work and their students and their needs. What would you add to that?
Well, I would just add that That's absolutely right. As we started out with the idea of we're just going to go late start or early release or a combination of both across the district. But as we started looking at the negotiated agreement and started looking at what we would have to do to make that happen, there needed to be changes in the school days across the district. And when we read the agreement, it said that changes like that needed to be agreed upon by staff at each school. So that's when we realized that we really needed to put it in their hands, to give them several models, and then let them kind of work with those models to see what would work best in their community. Eventually, we may get to, we do the same thing across the district. But that is, I mean, we had waited for years to say, well, maybe we can get this through in the negotiated agreement, and the timing is never right. You have to make these decisions out of sync with when things are going forward for negotiations. So I don't know that it will go that way, but my guess is with all of the talk about this year that there may be some things that come forward that make this better in the end. The teachers have said, even though this has been difficult, we do want to collaborate. We really do want to collaborate. This has been harder than we thought, and I think we would all agree. We know collaboration is the best thing, but this is harder than we thought.
Well, thank you for bringing up the negotiated agreement. Of course, we have to abide by that. I just am concerned about, if there is some talk across, and I know we don't have perfectly clean feeder school systems, but
Outside of Boulder, they are pretty clean, and it is feeder systems that are really doing a lot of planning and thinking together. Today, there was a group of principals from Louisville here. They spent a lot of time working this through. Broomfield has, Lafayette has, and we are really trying to be sensitive to those families that are in multiple schools. I think that's one of the things that makes it complicated, though. And yeah, it would always be easier to be able to say, this is the way it is, but the time you save in making the decision, you spend in implementing the decision, because there would be a lot of dissatisfaction with that. So it is messy trying to get this, but actually, I think the positive is that we have a lot of schools, dozens of schools, that have a model in place, a model they've signed off on, and they're behind. We're really working on the schools that are still where it's sticky, but a lot of schools have landed on a model and are ready to go. And as you pointed out, a lot of schools have been doing this for years.
great, thank you.
Jim?
So I have a couple of observations. One is I'm the DAC liaison to the board. I typically go, I give a 5 to 10 minute update on what we've been doing, what might be coming up. I offer to answer any questions there, as well as stay after to answer any questions. At our last DAC meeting, I had over 20 parents stay after for a half an hour to let me know their observations on the implementation of collaboration time. I think what their concerns could come down to are what kinds of inputs do the parents have in this process? I came here with an open mind tonight, and then I hear you say, this is probably the biggest system-wide transition in BVSD we've ever had. And I wonder, what would the parent voice in this? What kinds of things are parents going to be seeing in the fall? What kinds of changes to their schedules, their children's schedules, the articulation between schools are they going to be experiencing? My concern is that these DAC members are usually our most informed members. They're our consistent volunteers. They're plugged into everybody else. They were highly concerned about this. They want this to work. One other thing they observed to me was that they weren't sure what the benefit of collaboration time is. When I hear from teachers, I hear, we want to do this, but the process for doing this hasn't been as collaborative as we would have thought collaborative time discussions would be. I understand that there's a lot of things that are going to change in this. I understand that we have books that say we're going to get a lot better in whatever statistics. I also know we've had 7 schools that were doing this as a pilot, and it sounds like the data is possibly not out yet. So it sounds to me, I wonder if we're committing to something on a pilot that the data isn't fully there yet. So that's another question. I'm going to throw a couple more at you and then turn it back to you. So the one thing for the communications plan for the district for rolling this out, my concern is that the parents haven't been as involved, that they're going to see this change in August. We're going to see 2 months of implementation bump, and the parents are going to be very unhappy and the kids are going to be unsettled, and we're going to lose time right at the start. But the one thing I did like when you were talking about this is how are you going to report this back out? You know, much like when we said, let's do some tag pilots. And we've been trying to think of how do you report back out how these are going, what kinds of criteria. And I realize sometimes the criteria, they show themselves in the middle of the process. I'd like it if we're having such a huge system-wide change that we have some criteria that we could be laying out for people sooner rather than later, and especially with our parent community. I may have more questions or observations for you later, but I would like to turn it back to you now to respond to some of that.
Well, I'm going to start because I'm going to turn it over to you for, and I think, an obvious reason, and then we can kind of parlay it. But great questions, Jim. Thank you. When we came to you in March of 2010, and we had talked to you, you had told us in October of the previous year, what can we do to help you close the gap? So we go scurrying out, talk to DLT. We came back in March, and we brought you 4 initiatives. One of them was collaboration time, professional development and collaboration time. One of them was extended learning time. I was in charge of that one. Sandy was in charge of collaboration time and professional development time. So she has done a lot of research on the value of that for a system, especially to close an achievement gap. So I'm going to turn it over to her because to start with, and then I'll get back. I have been a principal who has done this in my school. I have gotten parents on the bandwagon, and so I can help you with that in a minute.
It strikes me tonight that as several of you talked about what you saw at Columbine, and you saw the principal with data in his hands about every individual student and how each student was progressing, and that he knew where everyone was and how they were intervening and what was going to happen next, that can be and should be the work of professional learning communities. That is how our teachers and our principals are learning to work with data. But over and over and over again, the biggest barrier is not having the time for that. That is part of what can happen during this time, to really get clear about where our kids are and to bring the people in the room together who can talk about those kids and bring the different perspectives together as to why those kids are or are not learning. Educating every child these days it's never been done before. This is new for all of us. And I think the DeFores, in the way they've set out a professional learning community, really does, the time for collaboration is about that. What are the teachers' greatest challenges? How can they talk to each other to get their different perspectives about those challenges? And how are they going to better educate our kids? That's why we believed it was the best thing, or one of the high leverage strategies to close the achievement gap. I'm going to read something to you that we actually gave to you last spring.
Perhaps I could interrupt.
Sure.
My observation wasn't that the teachers or staff don't think this is valuable.
Right.
I think they all do. My observation is I'm not sure our parent community sees the value in that, and kind of wondering what are we doing in that area.
That's a great question. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. We did recently put a drop-in newsletter article, sent that out to all of the schools so that they can put that into a newsletter in their schools. When we went to we can't make the decision for all of our schools across the district, we also went to every school needs to be responsible for communicating with their parents. And part of the feedback back to us is how they're doing that. Many of our schools, and Ellen would have to give us the number, have chosen to do this outside of the instructional day. So it won't be impacting parents at all. It happens after school or before school by changing the work time of teachers rather than during school. So when schools went that direction, there really wasn't a need to survey parents or to say how they're feeling about it. The schools that are proposing or thinking about a late start or an early release, they are doing surveys in their communities. Lafayette Elementary is an example of that, where they did a survey in their community as to if we did a late start or we did an early release, and your kids, when would you be most likely to keep your kids home, for instance? So they're looking at almost 600 kids that they would have to care for in some way at their school. And they were looking for some idea of how many kids would actually come if they weren't starting school for an hour later. So they are doing that on a school-by-school basis. 23 of our schools at this point have chosen an option that is outside of the school day and will not impact instructional time for students. And you know, I feel bad. DAC is one group that Ellen and I haven't spoken with. We did speak to DPC a couple of weeks ago and answered a lot of their questions, and we felt, I left that room feeling like they were very supportive and had their answers to the questions they had. So we probably should have come in and talked to DAC as well.
I'd like to add one more thing, that so we put a lot of information on the website too, and we let all the principals know that their parents could go and look on the website, and we gave them all the information about why even do a collaboration time, what difference does it make, what are some of the things people do during a collaboration time, that sort of thing. When I was at Casey, we talked a lot about that we needed time to meet and talk about student work, not about students, but about the work, and try to work with. So for example, in the 8th grade team, if an 8th grade language arts teacher would bring some work and say, these are some struggles that this student has, then we would have interventionists there, we would have teachers of mathematics there, and everyone would try to work on how to improve that particular student's work. And everyone would know what that student was struggling with, and everyone could help that student then in his or her class. So we went to the parents and said, we're going to do a late start, but you can send your student at the regular time and we'll have activities. So, and in the beginning about 60 students came and we had activities for them. By about the second month, there were about 15 students who came. And all the rest of the students came later, and they and their parents were really glad they had extra time to sleep in. So I think it's every school is different. I never had an issue with the parents there. They really appreciated the Casey teachers gave so much extra time, and they appreciated that there was a way that the community could give back in hopes that this time would help their students get a better, more intense education. I'm trying to think, let me look
Well,
at.
I was just looking at our high poverty schools at the elementary level, and first of all, we did set aside some money to help them so that they could have kids come to school and have activities occurring for them. That's how Creekside got their model started, and Columbine followed suit. But even most of those schools have decided to do an option C with changing their school time for teachers outside of the instructional day. So that seems to be the most popular model at this point, just because our schools didn't want to disrupt families and students.
Okay.
Were there other questions in there? I know you asked a lot. I didn't have a pen up here to be writing them down, so.
I wrote a couple down. I think there's one that may be implicit that you didn't state. I want to make sure everyone knows that one of the parameters that we are really rigorous about is that there will not be a diminishing of instructional time to children. In fact, if anything, what we've really been promoting is extending the learning time for children in the midst of the collaboration time initiative. So I think maybe that's a little bit of what I heard in your concern.
Elaine?
Just listening to this, a couple thoughts I have. I mean, I understand that we have a negotiated agreement that requires this kind of conversation happen at the school level. Maybe next time we're in negotiations, we should be looking at things other than salary and actually look at changes to the contract that align with our strategic initiatives and our strategies, because I know all of our teachers care as much about it, closing the achievement gap and all students achieving as we all do. So be interesting to actually have those kinds of conversations. Because it is a site-based decision, what I'm hearing is we also end up with site-based communications.
Yes.
And the vagaries of communications from one principal in their community to another could be great. I'm wondering if the learning here is that we can't just rely on schools to do individual communications, and it isn't too late to do something about that. I mean, perhaps the next superintendent's blog entry on the website should be about the merits of collaboration time and why this initiative is being undertaken. Or can we do some broad district-wide communication to parents where we can ensure it goes out, kind of a step above doing a drop-in to newsletter. I guess the only other thing that I wanted to say is, sometimes we treat these initiatives as if Boulder Valley School District is the only school district in the world that's looking to do this kind of work. So we think we have to reinvent everything because we're so unique here. And I would just say that there are districts all over the country that have already successfully implemented this and actually have already successfully come up with measures and metrics for determining the effectiveness. And rather than our need to reinvent everything here, I think parents and community members would take comfort from knowing that these strategies have been effective in other districts and giving them the same kind of national research that was the foundation of your recommendation. And I'm not sure we always do a very good job, as good a job as we could in communicating that information. But, there is a certain amount of impatience, or I'm sure Leslie and I just look at each other and roll our eyes every time this conversation comes up because we've talked about this for years. When the DLT presented it to us with the research that was done, it is a sound strategy for gap closing work. It's a sound strategy for differentiated instruction to meet the needs of all different types of learners. And it's a strategy for providing support for our teachers who are being asked to do more than they've ever been asked to do. And let's not go back and question whether it's a valid strategy, but rather let's help our schools have the same level of comfort with it that we do, or some of us do. So,
Jenny?
Well, first of all, I'd like to start with a couple of observations, and one is that one of the first schools I visited this fall, the principal handed me an article on 90-90-90 schools. That is, schools that have 90% poverty, 90% minorities, and 90% proficiency rates. And one of the things that this article said was that the schools may not have a whole lot in common, but one thing they all have in common is they have this collaboration time, and that the collaboration time is very focused on student achievement and on student work, on assessing. Actually, what they said was it was making sure that there were common assessments, that the teachers were all assessing the work the same way so that one person's proficient wasn't another person's advanced, wasn't another person's partially proficient. But anyway, so I was kind of, I'm supportive of this effort. And I'd also just sort of like to comment as an aside that when my children started to Cole Elementary in 1993, there was an early release time there on Thursday afternoons. All the kids got out early so the teachers could spend time collaborating together. So it's a case of everything new is old again, everything old is new again. And then I'd like to sort of ask, some of the comments we've had have to do with collaboration across grade levels. And some of the emails we have gotten have sort of regretted the lack of ability to collaborate, say, between 5th and 6th grade or between 8th and 9th grade, and I wonder how we're addressing that.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. Another thing that is in our negotiated agreement is that we get 3 half days in the district for professional development that are district coordinated days, and that the teachers who I worked with at the beginning of this year in this advisory group said, we'd really like for you to use those days to let us collaborate across schools. So between grade levels or even at other grade levels like second grade or content areas, social studies, that teachers in different schools could come together and have that opportunity to talk in the same way that they're doing at the school level but across schools. So they actually asked us to design those 3 half-days next year to be able to do that. And while it's not nearly enough, it's better than nothing. And so I think that will be our intent next year, is to give them that time. A benefit of everybody doing the same thing would have perhaps been a little bit more of that on a weekly basis. But as we looked at what it would take to get to another place, get set up, do your work, then get back to school and start with kids, it probably wouldn't have happened as much as we would have hoped. So.
And I'd like to make another observation, which is that when I was at Aspen Creek, they had started some of this collaboration time as a part of their RTI process. And one of my observations is, and I'm sure you're aware of this, is it's not, I mean, we've spent a lot of time finding the time, but it's not really the time that takes practice, it's the quality of the conversation, and that takes real practice.
Exactly.
And I'm actually more concerned about that than I'm convinced that once we get used to the new schedule, people will adapt to it if we're having the right kinds of conversations, and I'm not sure how we're going to make sure that happens.
Well, that has to be part of our professional development for leaders, and each school is supposed to have a design team, and we're encouraging that design team to be representative of the different teams or contents in a school, so that as they're planning for this, they do that in advance, and then also have a how will we know it's successful part of that as they go. So that is one of our parameters, that they have a collaboration design team at the school that does design that. So we'll.
Didn't you meet with them earlier this year, the collaboration team? No. Okay.
Okay, and then I haven't heard how do specialists, the art and music, how do those teachers that don't teach core subjects fit into this conversation?
That's a good question, and schools are really going to have those conversations. I think middle schools and any secondary schools sometimes have more art, music, PE. When I used to do collaboration time at El Dorado, those folks all met together. My music teachers, my art teachers, my PE teachers. There were actually a lot of things that they did have in common, and they got closer and worked together more as a result of that time. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is it really is valuable for those people to meet with different grade level teams at the elementary level, because their work supports the work of students in the classroom. Music teachers, PE teachers, art teachers, they can all be supporting the content work that happens in classrooms. So their ability to jump into those meetings, and in a pre-K 5 school, which most of our elementaries are now, to get to each of those teams for those specialists would actually take quite a lot of time and work. So I think they'll be kept busy.
At Casey, I just want to say real quickly, some of the most profound literacy work was being done in art and physical education.
So
they used to present the writings of the students in our staff meetings and say, you don't know who this student is, and they'd put the writing up from their classes in our staff meetings. So I think we underestimate the power of the specialist to find a way to be incorporated into this work.
And I hope we'll find a way to include our talented and gifted people in those conversations as well. Because
Everybody. That's why we're looking at the whole staff being involved in this collaboration time.
Okay, Tom?
I'll keep this short since we're talking a long time on the subject, but I've gotten about maybe a dozen different communications on the subject, both from parents and from teachers. And overall, what the parents are saying is a schedule issue for them. You change my kid's schedule issue.
Logistics.
In fact, I haven't really heard any of them say that this is a bad thing. In fact, they say, well, this schedule, you're taking a good thing and making it bad because of our schedule. And from the teachers, what I've heard is that, well, we did this by changing the teacher's schedule, not the kids' schedules. So that's the two sides of the coin I've heard. But the one question I wanted to ask is, early on, you said there were some compromises you had to make. Could you elaborate a bit on what those compromises are, and are they serious compromises? Are they going to jeopardize the program?
Well, we've looked at each other. We don't feel like they're in any way jeopardizing the quality of the program.
No, it really is just that they'll maybe have 2 times a month instead of every week, that they'll have every week, or they'll have a 1 week with their grade level team and the next week where all teachers are available. So schools have been doing this in so many different ways. Some schools, not all schools, some schools have been doing this in those little ways where grade level teams meet, and we wanted the time where they could go through a vertical articulation with teachers meeting, you know, K-6 or all content teachers. So this will provide that kind of time. So really that was our biggest concession, is that it didn't have to be 55 minutes a week, every week, after school. That was our biggest concession.
That was the original vision, like Leslie mentioned, all schools at the same time doing the same thing. And there are districts not far from here that are doing it that way. But I think some of the pushback that we are experiencing now would have been multiplied had we gone with that model. And we tried, for better or worse, right or wrong, to use a more Boulder-like way, which is to allow schools to meet the spirit of it but in different models. And so we end up with a lot of different schools doing the same thing, but trying to achieve the same goal.
Okay. I think that I just want to share an idea that John Creighton, who's actually the president of the board in St. Vrain Valley, but he's also a person who has been studying community attitudes. He does that for a living. And one of the presentations that I attended at CASB last time was kind of interesting in that he said, you know, community engagement is not really in his work what we need. It's really community permission. And that kind of goes to, I think, what Jim was saying earlier. And we're talking about making significant changes, as you said, some major systemic change to schools. We're talking about many of these kinds of issues right now. This is just one example of that, and many of these things have to fit together. But I think that somehow, and I'm not sure, he didn't really go into how to do this as much as that he thinks that's really what has to happen. But his statement was that true education reform is not going to happen unless the community gives us permission to do that. So I think maybe part of what we've talked about tonight a little bit is this idea of how do we get this information out in a better way so that parents, teachers, so that everyone understands what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and can really roll up their sleeves and say, yeah, this is good for the kids, this is what we're trying to achieve, instead of focusing on what appears to me from a lot of the emails I'm getting, misinformation, or zeroing in on little details about things. I mean, I think we've probably, and maybe we all share a little bit of this, we just have not expressed to our community why this is a major system change, why this is really getting to Helene's point. You know, there's good research behind this. This is something we really should be doing. Other people are doing this. So why doesn't the parent who writes us the email say in their email, boy, you know, I'm really behind this because I understand what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. But that's not what we're getting. We're getting, well, gosh, I'm against increasing instruction or decreasing instruction time, when in fact, most of the time we're not doing that. Helene?
Well, think about what you just said. We never hear from people when they're happy. So when was the last time you got an email that said, you know, the percentage of people that take the time to tell you when they agree with something is pretty small.
Well, maybe that's
And so
true.
on any issue, you know, we usually only hear from the people who are unhappy. And I think, you know, going back to Stan Garnett's famous line, we have to always remember that we're hearing usually from the vocal minority.
Right. And actually, I think that's what John Creighton was saying, that basically it's good when the community just lets you do it. So,
Well, we
and
appreciate
maybe to your point, maybe the point that I really didn't think about enough is maybe that's exactly what's going on here. I mean, my mailbox has not been full of these kind of emails. I've gotten, you know, half a dozen maybe. So maybe in fact I was out of place in saying that maybe in fact our community has given us permission to do this, and we should just go ahead and do it as well as we possibly can.
We appreciate your time tonight, letting us talk about this in this way. And I guess we've just inherently trust our principals to carry forth this message. And I think if you're only getting a dozen or a half a dozen, it's a tribute to the leaders in our school, not only the principals, but the teachers. And we know this has been really challenging, but they're really doing a fabulous job with this. So if you have any other ideas about how we could better communicate to the schools and to the parent community, we're happy to engage in those.
Quick comment.
The blog?
The blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just went back, I thought we had done one, but I just went back online here and we didn't, and
Okay.
so I think that the timing is right for that.
Good.
Definitely.
Very quick, Tom.
Yeah, have you considered use of technology to help this? You know, such as tweet chats or Skype. Andrew probably can help us out a lot, but that may help solve some of the logistics if we could bring some of the technology in. It's not necessarily as good as face-to-face, but, you know, it could help.
Well, it's better than maybe what we're
Better
doing.
than none
so-
at all.
Okay.
It adds to
Yeah.
the message.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next agenda item is action items consent grouping. Tonight, this consists of personnel items, approval of minutes of the February 22nd, 2011 regular meeting, award of contract for early childhood education construction services at Monarch K-8, cancel March 22nd board meeting, consultant agreement approval, renewal of Justice High School charter contract, and a grant for Horizons Charter School. It's a BEST grant, capital project, Colorado Department of Education. Do I have a motion to approve the consent grouping? Lori, second by Jenny. All right, does anybody want to pull any of these items? Elaine?
I guess I'll start with, I'd like to ask some questions about E before I decide to pull.
All right, go ahead.
So item E is the consultant agreement approval for the, what's his first name? Richard Vila for the 2011-2012 school year. And I had questions about where the funding for this contract would be, because I'm pulling it up in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I read that it's from expected one-time monies, and then I couldn't help but reflect on our previous board conversation, and that this doesn't actually fit in the priorities for those dollars, so.
It was originally ARA money that we received, and because of the maintenance of effort, we were able to shift some of those dollars to general fund, so it is part of the general fund carryover, and that's how we're able to fund it. Leslie just back, but we actually did that work prior to Leslie leaving when we did the maintenance of effort, and we shifted some of those dollars into general fund so that we had more flexibility. That's how come we're able to continue it beyond the end of the ARA. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, so it does lead me to my questions about our discussion at our last meeting about carryover funds and priorities to which those would be allocated. And I'm just wondering how that conversation about funds relates to this decision.
Not sure I understand the question.
Well, we talked about what the priorities would be if we had carryover funds for how those funds would be spent, the use of one-time monies. I did not see anything reflected in that conversation at the board work session that would have this contract come to the top of the pile for funding.
Well, this project, the Villa training, predates that conversation, by a year or so. It really, we have a multi-year commitment for that training, and this has been in the works for many, many months. So it predates the conversation that we had at the last meeting about those priorities. I see this as an existing commitment that we've already made. I mean,
If it's an existing commitment we've already made, why is it a new contract up for approval?
well, we can't contract for multiple years with, so we would bring a contract forward. But in our planning, the plan for this training is multi-year planning.
This will be the third and final year for the training and the support.
And I guess I'm just wondering then for our, maybe this turns into an RFI for our budget conversation of how many more implicit multi-year arrangements do we have that could come forward that could be, we could be using one-time money for? And I'm just trying to have.
None?
Yeah.
I mean,
None?
this is a special project that I think we've talked quite a bit about. Many of you came and watched the training and everything. Is it a concern about the training itself, or?
No, I'm just trying to hold us to, it's a process thing, that's why I'm raising it. But, I just think we seem to be having as a board a desire to put some processes in place where they haven't been. And that's what the point I tried to make at the last board meeting about the process. Well, now here's an exception to the process, and I'm making that point. I'm using this to make a point that if we want to put processes in place, we have to also be aware that we need some kind of exception management. So it is not an objection to the program at all. It's
Cabinet
really
did-
just, how come it's okay sometimes to use one-time money for some stuff, but it isn't okay to use it
I
for
think the
others?
fact that it is one-time general fund money is a bit of a misnomer here. It really is ARA money that we have cost shifted from into that place, but it is a little different in that we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for the ARA money, plain and simple.
I guess I thought the ARA money went away,
Well, except that.
except that you moved it, so now you're taking it
less-
back.
Yeah.
Right, and it's not unusual for the Title I funding and those grants, they have carryover funds every year. And so this is just an unusual situation where because of the spending requirements around the ARA funds, we did cost shift over to the general fund. And so then this project just became a part of the special ed's general fund budget for this current year and was a part of that budget process. So it is a little bit different than normal general fund carryover funds.
And it was treated a little differently at Cabinet. We did bring it specifically to Cabinet and discussed it, and it was full agreement that we would use this one-time money in this way.
But
And I guess the next point I'll make is when, for all of you who are thinking about this process, when is it a cabinet decision and when is it a board decision? So that's all
You
I.
have an implicit build here is what you have.
right.
That's all.
Well, it's
But I-
clearly in front of the board as a board decision. If you vote no, then it's decided. So
Right, I want to be clear, I am not raising these issues because I am against funding this program. So I'm not going to vote against this. However, I am trying to make the point about we seem to have some inconsistencies in what we think is the span of control of decision-making for the board and how we're going to handle exceptions. And that's,
with that, I would agree for sure.
And I guess my concern is that I think, when we talk about one-time money, I'm not sure that that's exactly the same thing as multi-year commitments. I mean, when we talk about kind of one-time money, it's things that don't commit us to kind of an ongoing forever sort of expense. But how, and I think this goes back to another process question, and that is, how do we make a commitment, say, to a consultant, using one-time money, and then be able to set aside a reserve so that we know that the 3 years for this particular project will be carried over for 3 years without it being rated for something else. Is that kind of the issue you're talking about? Okay. So I mean, I think maybe we need to bring this back as part of the budget discussion, or it's a process discussion. How do we manage these multi-year commitments that the district makes so that we don't get ourselves into hot water because we did it 1 year and then we forgot that something was happening and we didn't know about it, and I think that's what the concern is.
and it could be a reporting thing, by the way.
Maybe
It
it's-
could be
yeah.
just a need to have a report that shows what are implicit multi-year commitments when you're looking at the budget.
Well, this idea of a designated fund that we didn't get to talk about last time
Right.
is what this would be perfect for. I'm going to do this for 3 years, or we're starting something up, it's going to take longer.
Right.
We just designate it.
Okay, one more comment, because we're way off the topic of the.
Well, I do have a quick
consent
comment, and
agenda.
I want to relate it to something Jim said earlier, which is, that it's not the financial piece so much, but I would love to be hearing back on these pilots that are going on, the collaborative teaching, how the lab schools are going, how the TAG pilot is going, how the collaboration time is going in our pilot schools. So I'm hoping that we'll also get reports back, just not only on how the money is being spent, which is important, but the results of these pilots as well, please.
All right, so are there any?
I think Leslie has one last.
Oh, sure.
Right, I was just going to add it. We actually have very few of these multi-year contracts, and are required to put them in our audit every year. And on it, so we rarely do have these. It's this one and the superintendent's contract is usually the only ones that we have in existence. So it is a rare occasion.
This is really neither fish nor fowl. I mean, it is a grant. It's more like a grant than it's like anything else. But it's not truly a grant the way that we're doing it now. So it is kind of a unique situation.
Okay, so does anybody else want to pull this or any other of the consent items? All right, does anybody have any other questions about this or any other consent item? Okay, hearing none, Sandy, would you call the vote, please?
Albright?
Yes.
Belleville?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Roberge?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're pretty close to the 2-hour mark. Let's take about a 5-minute break, and the next topic on the agenda will be the leadership profile. If we could all take our seats, please, I would appreciate it. Our next agenda item is an action item, and it's to approve the superintendent leadership characteristic profile. I would like a motion to approve the profile, please. Jim, seconded by Tom. Okay, at this point, I would like to introduce Dr. Fred Schrader and Dr. Dorothy Weber. They are from the firm of Hazard, Young, Attia and Associates Limited. That's the superintendent search firm that the district has engaged to assist us in our task of finding the best qualified superintendent for the Boulder Valley School District. So with that, I will ask them to please present the leadership profile that they have been working on for the last several weeks.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us. We work as an equal team in this project. I somehow drew the straw that I'm going to do the majority of the presenting tonight. Dot, did you want to say anything?
No, I'll be available for questions when we get to that part with the discussion.
So I'll do a little introductory comments to the process. We're most happy to be back in Boulder Valley School District serving the school board and the community and the children. Dot and I are a married couple. We feel we live full-time in Grand Lake, and we feel very attached to Boulder Valley School District. We had the opportunity to serve your district 4 years ago. So we feel like we personally have a lot invested in this. Between the two of us, we have 21 years in the superintendency. Dot is the senior partner. She has 13 years in the superintendency. Between the two of us, we have over 80 years of involvement in public education. So what we're going to try to do over this process is listen very carefully to you, to the data, and to all that we know and all of our experience, and find the very best candidates that we can bring forward to you for you to make the decision as to who should be your next superintendent. In fact, my goal in all this is to have you just have three such good candidates that you have a hard time deciding. And that's our goal in this. The report that went out to you yesterday about noon, I believe, I like to call the report our report. We've done it for you, so it is yours, but it's our report. But I want to stress that the last page of the report, page 19, which is called Summary of Characteristics Desired, that very much has to be your piece. And as we leave here tonight, we hope that we can have very good clarification, additions, and any other additional directions that you might wish to impart to us. This report is very important. I call it it's a screen through which we both view candidates and through which we filter candidates. It provides us many different pieces of information to make decisions from, questions to ask, and I call them look-fors as people answer questions. So it's a very important document. I'm very pleased that we've been able to move this quickly, and very humbled at the work that the board has put in to be certain that there's good community input. I think one of the things that I know most about Boulder Valley School District is that people are involved, they care, they love their school district, and they love their children. So I think it's very critical that we went through that process. And to that end, and for those that may not know, we interviewed all of the 7 of you individually, the superintendent, Dr. King, as well as you conducted the 4 community engagement pieces, and we had the online survey, which had 1,426 responses. Couple of pieces I do want to point out, and it states it in the document. We do not profess that this is a truly scientific review and data analysis of all that information. It's more of a sincere effort to listen, to pull together various data points, blend that together with knowledge and experience, and produce this report. The other thing that you'll hear me say frequently as we move through the process is that we are not going to find one individual that absolutely 100% characterizes these characteristics. So, board members, as you make this, and I think this is one of the most important, if not the most important decision you have to make as a board, keep that in mind. You know, think broadly, listen deeply, and together you will make a great decision. So, instead of just launching into a review of the findings, I'm going to make another generalized statement and just turn it back to you, President. We feel that this update and validate process validated the prior survey, but there are some real shifts and changes. And so instead of reviewing them right up front, let's see what questions you have. And if you direct me to, I will pull out those things that you think that if you want me to answer that way. So with that, Mr. President, turn it back to you.
Okay. So I guess we could do this several different ways. I guess maybe the best thing to do is to you should all have copies of this, the 2011 summary and the 2006-07 summary. Anything in particular between those two documents that catches your eye, because this whole process was really, I guess I'm starting at kind of the bottom line, which is this whole process was involved in making those changes that appear between those two pages of the report. And so maybe that's a good place to start. And in sort of examining why those changes were made, how they were made, we can probably delve down more into the detail. So with your permission, I guess I would like to suggest we start in that mode, and who would like to make some comments? Leslie.
Well, I just noticed, comparing bullets, that we dropped one out of the 06, 07, and then added 2, 4, 6 into the 2011. And I know when I met with you two to talk about the next step, when I looked over the 06, 07, there were issues that were more predominant, and Chris has done a good job on those, and some of those have sort of dropped in importance, whereas now some new things have come up. And I know that you have listed these alphabetically, but I just wonder if maybe we want to highlight or, put sort of like we did with the community engagement, where your top 2 from a table went into the list. We've got some data with the graphs that we can pull from the community input. Just as you say, no one's going to be everything, and that's a lot of bullets, and I wonder if we want to try to highlight some areas. Just a question for discussion.
Yeah, and we're not hesitant to, if you would like us to illustrate what we think the major things that popped out. So it's whatever the desire of the board is.
I mean, my sense is, why don't you do that?
Okay.
I think that's,
Okay.
That way
Great.
you're the most familiar with these changes,
Great.
and then we can kind
Great.
of ask why.
I think the biggest thing that stands out overall is the continued concern about the achievement gap. And not just that the achievement gap exists and that you know that it exists, but renewed urgency to addressing that. I think that's probably far and away the biggest.
I think from the community engagement as well as from board comments, there were numbers of words related to achievement gap in different phrases and different settings. So without a doubt, that is still the major focus that we heard and that we read. What throws this a little bit different from the data we had for the first LPR in 06-07 is we didn't have access to that online survey. And the online survey used different vocabulary, different subsets than what we had established. So we chose not to move into that, but also not to ignore that. So what I'm saying that is there wasn't a lot of language in there about achievement gap per se. That isn't to say we still wouldn't have added to that, even if we'd only used an online survey as some of the basis for some of the language. So it's very clearly there, and needs to be forefront in what we're looking for, what you're looking for, questions we might address.
And there are actually several points to the achievement piece. The achievement gap and the urgency to it is probably one of the biggest. I think another one is somewhat of a sense that you would like to see, we would like to see across the board rising of achievement. That a wonderful district, high achieving, but let's not stop there. Let's push to that next level. And a third piece to that is that as we work to do all those things, the high-end achiever, the struggling achiever, and the middle, let's not sacrifice any piece of that. Let's attend to the whole piece and bring it up. Very tricky to do. Limited resources, all kinds of concerns. So achievement, I think, is the big thing. There are several others. And I might go to one that's less of a concern. I think Leslie kind of hinted at it there, that 4 years ago, the idea of visibility and communications was, I believe, much more pronounced. Now, that's not to say that that's not important now, but there's been some real success there, and that needs to be kept going. So it's just not out there as much as it was in the prior report.
And in fact is why we eliminated, there were actually two statements in the 06-07 that had to do with visibility. We eliminated one of those and felt the essence of it was still in another one, so that was one of the changes we made.
Another area, I think, of concern that came out more than in the prior LPR is the relationship between the administration and the union per se. And, you know, there are all kinds of issues there. I think that from what I gathered and my interpretation of the data is that the push to change and to try new things creates a little stress. This current conversation was very interesting for us to listen to. But I think also the economy and the stresses that everybody is going through in the economy puts everyone on edge, and it makes it a kind of a hyperbolic kind of an atmosphere. So, but it's there. So, and I think to ignore it is not wise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, another that we added had to do with finances. 4 years ago, there was a concern about declining enrollment, which would result in a reduction of funds to the district. You had just passed a bond issue. There was concern about how that would unfold, whether it would be spent wisely, how the community would react to that, and just a general uncertainty. And little did we know 4 years ago what was really going to happen 2 years after that. So now we are later where finances from an economic condition compared to the districts in the state, Boulder Valley is situated very well. The community outreach and communication and the visibility, you've passed an override to your levy that districts have got to be envious of you for doing that. Doesn't solve your financial issues, but puts you in a much better situation than you might have been. However, there still is a concern about use of those funds. The question that happened about where are we doing with our funds? What are our priorities? They are still very much limited, and you have immense tasks ahead of you. Some of that pressure again about achievement gap. You know, if we could just have the resources we need, we could do this. Well, you know, we don't. We have limited funds. So we did include from the language of the online survey the item that was related to, it was in one of the top numbers of the percentages of those respondents of the overall related to finances, that is something that has to be addressed, to be watched and addressed.
And I think two other pieces that came out that probably weren't apparent in the prior document is the utilization of the board's strengths and the board work and what's the proper function of the board and how the board superintendent interface. That came out a little bit more than in the prior report. And I think maybe the final thing that I'm thinking of right now and looking at my notes is some feeling that there's a responsibility of Boulder Valley School District to be represented at the table at the state level. So a piece there that's a little bit different than what we heard before. And I think those are probably the main things.
No, and I guess another issue that I would certainly appreciate board comment and direction here, and that has to do with diversity. Very, very much a strong element and a characteristic of Boulder Valley, and something that is valued and appreciated and addressed, and all the aspects that you do with that word, which means a lot to a lot of different people. However, from the validation exercise with community engagement, that was the one that came up, and we had it listed at that time in the profile from 0607. You know, diversity is a positive force, and you know there was some question about that one, and there was also some question about every child learning. So we took, you know, we didn't play with the wording, or I guess wordsmith, not play so much, but wordsmith around diversity, but I felt that we needed to address that in a better statement. And it is reflected in two elements on the 0607 that we left in for the 11. At the top, diversity is a positive force, and then down in the middle, a leader who demonstrates the ability to understand and respect diverse populations. So I think if we could think of how you want to express that, that would be good. And then the other one is a change we made. Every student can and will learn at high levels. We assumed from the community engagement feedback that the high levels may have been the questioning factor that created such a dissonance with that one. And so we just removed at high levels and said every student can and will learn. But again, that was our interpretation. We were not at those sessions. We, you know, looked at data, we talked with you, those type of things. So there is room for some suggestion, for some, you know, board comment, or for some board tweaking here.
Yeah. One last piece that does bring to mind, on the online survey, the generalized category of instructional leadership was consistently rated relatively lower by all groups than all the other categories of leadership. And I really thought about that and thought about it, and I believe that what people are saying there is that the superintendent per se does not have to be the instructional leader. Because if you look at some of the other categories about core knowledge and so on and so forth, so I think that what they're saying, but I would look to the board for guidance on this, I think that what they're saying is that the superintendent leads a large team. And the superintendent may not be the person who truly knows the research book on instructional leadership. But that person needs to be the leader of that team and promote and support that team that does provide the actual instructional leadership. That's how I see that, and I would certainly be happy to have some input from the board.
So comments or questions? Tom?
Yeah, why don't we just get into the discussions here. So I put together a table for myself. I sent it out to you guys and got comments. I spent too much time on it, but I didn't really spend that much time on it. But what I did is took the 0607 and numbered those the 1 through 20, because there's 20 of them, and then just compared that to your recommendations from what you had done, and then tried to understand the rationale for the changes you made, and also tried to then look at it from my standpoint of what I heard at community engagement meetings, what I saw from the data, what I saw from not only the online survey, but from the, how many was it? We had like 434 comments. Mm-hmm. 434 yep. people actually gave comments. There were multiple comments, but there were a lot of comments. That was, I thought, really valuable. So what I tried to do is just put those up, and since our whole purpose here was to do two things: one, update, as you mentioned, mm-hmm. and then the other is validate. Is to ask myself, okay, all of these are important, all right, and as you said, what are now what would be reflective of our changing needs as a district from when it was back there. Not that some of those weren't important, it's just that we've done a good job at addressing those, and now our challenges maybe require a different skill set than we had back then. And I think we've done a lot of great things. So I went down and you know, I put some priority ranking, not on all of them, but on a couple of them that I thought were real high. And I also thought maybe that we ought to drop a couple of them so we don't have too many. So I saw that, you had modified what was the number 6. And I wondered why you did that. And then I saw that on the clicker data, it was like ranked the very lowest out of 20. Half the people said no. And I asked myself, why did half the people say no to that? And I think from reading the comments, that I think that the way you change the statement is probably a little bit more indicative of what people are thinking right now. And I would recommend still leaving that in there, but I like the change that you made on that.
Thank you.
The next one, you modified number 7, and it was just a slight modification.
Can you read that since this is?
Yeah, let me read these. That's a good idea. Thanks, Ken, because people don't know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about, but you guys may or may not. It read, strong curriculum, well-educated staff, differentiated instruction, and database decisions lead to success. And you slightly modified that. Instead of saying leads to success, you said creates a foundation for success. So that was one question I wanted to ask you. What prompted that wording?
I think there were a number of other elements identified throughout the interviews, throughout the feedback, through the comments, that these are not just what you have that lead to success. I mean, we could also add in there strong parental support, all kinds of elements, a wealth of extracurricular that adds to. So we decided that based on the richness of all those comments, that this was too limiting. And so we just said it would create a foundation. Very important, don't get me wrong,
right.
But it's not the only thing that would lead to success. And we didn't want to imply that.
And I will have to say that it's my recollection that that thought came out of one of the one-on-ones, and then it kind of matured as we went along. So I think the credit probably goes back to somewhere at the table here.
Good. The next one I had was number 15 that said, you mentioned this earlier, visibly work directly and fairly with internal and external groups. You said you dropped that. I looked at it as you replaced it with work effectively with the Board of Education.
Right.
We did.
Right. Okay, I think you covered that.
Because we still have a visibility element up under an educator who believes the last one still relates to visibility, so we haven't eliminated that, from your whole profile. We've just reduced its emphasis. I guess when you repeat something, I'm thinking you're emphasizing it a little bit more,
Right.
so we just reduced the emphasis.
Okay, all right, very good.
That's that little bit of a two-edged sword there, too, that good success here of the recent past doesn't mean it's not still important.
And then, so those were the changes, and then you add the new ones.
We did.
There was one that I wasn't quite sure the genesis of, and this one was advocate for and influence educational issues at the state level.
That came out several times on the one-on-one board interviews,
Okay,
quite frankly.
all right.
And we did give a heavy weight to board comments and board insights. You have the best vantage point, and you bear all the responsibility for the decision to be made. Once again now, that was a number of you. If the board says, no, that's not that important, that we want it out there, then, you can eliminate that. That is a board issue. Okay?
All right. Again, I'm just trying to clarify things here.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
You should. This is your document.
Yeah.
Then the next one in the order that I had, you added align financial resources with student learning needs and the district's vision, mission, and goals. And actually was the 8th ranked on the online survey. And we did see a lot of comments, so I assume.
A lot of comments on that.
Whole lot of comments.
And
assume
I
that-
think every school system across the country is wrestling with finances. For you not to address it somewhere, why?
Yes.
So we just felt it reflected reality.
Yes,
But
certainly
especially
different
those-
today than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially those comments.
Right. The next one that was new was foster a positive professional climate of mutual trust and respect among faculty, staff, and administrators. So that was number 2 on the survey, and a lot of comments.
Yeah, same thing, and we're not certain, what generated that in the databases, but I rather suspect tough economic times, people are worried and concerned about jobs, a lot of pressure for programmatic change, and therefore it bubbled up, and that was our way of putting that into the
Okay.
document.
All right, very good. Then the next new one was a strong understanding of organizational and educational leadership. And that was 4th ranked on the survey, and we had comments about it, right?
Yeah, well, the online survey really brought that in, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and then we looked to compare what those top issues were from the survey, and did we have any language that related to that? And I guess you could say there's a lot of implied leadership in here, but nothing that's stated, so we just stated it using the language from the survey.
Okay, very good. And then the last new one that you added was high expectations for all students and personnel, right? Which got 3rd on the survey and got a lot of comments.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, and then we also felt if we were removing the language up at the top there, every student can and will learn at high levels, we're replacing it with the high expectations. We're saying we are not moving away from high aspects of achievement and proficiency and enjoyment and all the good things we want for learning, but we are moving it into that statement as opposed to the one at the top.
Okay, good. So I think I understand now where you come from, okay? So maybe now let me give my slant.
Okay, summary.
Okay, if you allow me. Sure. So I think all of these are very good qualities, you know, and I hesitate a bit having so many. I also think that there may be 1 or 2 that are confusing and also maybe covered multiple times.
Sure.
And that I would recommend maybe leaving those out. So let me tell you those 2. The first one goes back to your comments about diversity, having a lot of diversity on here, where we were back then versus where we are now. It said diversity is a positive force, you know, and I agree with that, and I think we've recognized that as a district, and we've come a long way. I don't think, and I'm sure people will disagree with me, but I don't think that's one of our top issues right now, because I think we're dealing with that very well. And I think we've also covered that for example, in number 20, respect and value for all without regard to gender. And we need to add, you know, there was one
Gender
thing we had to add to
identity,
that.
right.
Yeah, that's, yeah, right, we need to add to that.
Policy AC.
Right, exactly, that policy. So, you know, I think, you know, the one place covering that is enough. That would be my recommendation. So drop the number 2, we've got it covered. The next one was what was number 5, and that is positive change results from sound leadership based upon the inclusion of all voices. So I have a problem with that just philosophically, because I read the survey results and I hear voices here, I hear voices here, I hear voices here, I hear voices here. So I don't see how we can get anywhere by including all voices, right? I don't see, we can't include all voices.
I think that the intent of the language there is to project that all voices must be legitimately listened to.
Yeah, and I think that's covered by that next one covers that says,
Yeah.
respectful consideration of all ideas and points of view must be honestly given.
I would like Dr. Weber to address this point.
Okay.
That was one he recommended we eliminate, and I said we didn't have enough support to back up us eliminating that, so.
Okay.
And I do think it came from the 06, where again, we were looking at, or the board was looking at involvement, engagement, listening, being visible. That inclusion of all voices was again a reflection of times
Right.
4 or 5 years ago. So, you know, it's up to the board, but I understand fully what you're saying. We had that discussion.
We had that discussion.
So those are the 2 that I'd recommend dropping, because I think we've got them covered other places, and I think we're doing good in those realms. Also, the 2 that I would prioritize, you know, you were talking about that, Leslie, was I would prioritize the number 18, fairness, honesty, integrity, and of course, courage to take personal risk. That ranked first in the clickers, that ranked first in the survey, and we got, oh gee, I don't know, about 50 different comments on that. I did a word count to see how that was, so I think that is a really top one. The other top one was was ranked second for our clickers there, and that was the priorities of thought and action that place students first. And again, I saw that over and over and over in our comments. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. President, by way of clarification, we're kind of taking notes as we go along, and there needs to be a lot more discussion, but would it be your intent that as there's apparent consensus on some of these suggestions, as time goes by, then we would incorporate them, and Sandy then, when the final posting is made, incorporate them?
Yeah, let's go around the
How the
table. Let's see
discussion
kind of
goes.
where we are, see if
Okay.
we can drive to consensus like that. So who wants to go next? Jim?
All right, so I appreciate all the work you did. I appreciated the community coming out and helping us determine these characteristics. I guess I don't view this document as a final interview piece, that these are the relative priorities based on their position on the piece of paper. I think that that's one of the jobs the community gave to us when they elected us here, is to assign our own relative priorities. I would slightly disagree with our consultants about you're not going to find somebody who meets all of these criteria, because when I compare the 2006-07, what you came up with to what we ended up with in Dr. King, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. So I'm expecting more of the same.
Dr. King.
As far as removing diversity as a positive force, or really just putting it down here in one place, I think that possibly is up to each of us to determine. There's going to be trade-offs when we see finalist candidates, because they're going to be very strong in a certain area and they may not be as strong in a certain other area. And I think it's really those trade-offs that we need to look at internally. This is just a document that's going to help guide what's presented to us. I think if diversity is on here 12 times, it doesn't mean we're going to look for people who are 12 times more culturally competent than normal.
I just worry if they're going to use it for screening.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we don't weigh it so that they're screening improperly.
Yeah.
And missing some other traits we think are important.
Okay. And then the one comment that you had thrown out there early in your presentation was the change of educational leader and the possible change in value of that. I'd like to offer my interpretation of that, which is when we hired Dr. King, educational leader was the thing the community was looking for. I think the bit of change you've seen and picked up on in the survey is the recognition that it's a big job, and that a great leader is going to hire great people to work for them, and that while we might be able to find one person who's strong in everything, that the community would actually probably be okay and accepting of they're going to be really strong here, and they're going to hire that person, their right-hand person, who's going to fill in those pieces. So that's my interpretation of it.
Would agree.
So my thinking on this, I would like to see the sentence about the basically just matching up our non-discrimination with what we put down in words. I think that policy, we went through a lot of work in adjusting it. So if we're going to have the words kind of match, let's go ahead and take it all the way and make it match. It's our policy AC. But that would be my only recommended change to this.
So can we start checking things off? Does everybody agree with that? I certainly agree with that statement. Pardon?
Just changing with the last sentence.
Right.
And I would
Okay,
like-
so we can
I mean,
check that one off
does
the
our
list.
policy include disability? Because we did have one parent bring up that disability belongs in there, and I think it's really important that we have somebody who respects and values people with disabilities, because I don't know if our policy.
If I may, from the second paragraph of our non-discrimination policy. Sure. The Boulder Valley School District will not tolerate discrimination, harassment, or violence against anyone, including students, staff members, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender identity, expression, sexual orientation, age, disability, or religion. And so I guess it's really the last piece of that we're including, not the whole sentence, the
No,
last
just
piece.
the descriptors where ours started with gender, they would start and mirror yours exactly.
Good, well, that'll be
Right.
done.
Yep.
Okay. Jenny?
Oh, I was going to ask about the disability piece. And I think I like this, and I like your recognition, I don't actually see it here, though, I like your recognition that one of the things that came up was that we should be as concerned with high and medium ability students as we are with lower ability students. So, I'm concerned that the document reflect that, but the other thing is, I sort of disagree, Tom, with diversity as a positive force is a slightly different statement, and I think it's an important statement than the other statements, because some of these other things have to do with toleration, and I think that what we want to say is that diversity is a real, I mean, we have a choice about whether we make diversity a strength or a weakness in our district, and I'd like somebody who thinks that it's a real strength of our district. And I also think that while diversity does include, you know, ethnicity and some of these other things that are in our discrimination statement, there are other things, other pieces of diversity in our district that, I mean, we have different points of view. Man, do we have different points of view. And we have multiple schools and multiple, I mean, so they're all, and there are multiple political, I mean, multiple communities. And so I think that the diversity piece, for me, reflects each of those things, and each of those things is important, and it's not just that we tolerate them or even that we understand them, but that we think this is really a great thing. We want somebody who thinks this is really a great thing about our district, otherwise they go home with a migraine headache every night. So, you know, I mean, I think it's a great thing about our district, and I'd like the person we hired to think that too. So I think I like that statement.
Somebody down at this end? Helene?
I was just reflecting on how well said you just were. Thank you. I agree with everything Jenny just said. I was sitting here reflecting on having gone through this before, and I think I'm pleased to hear that all of us hopefully realize that this is not a checklist, nor is it a prioritized ranking, and that what we will take into the interviews is a lot more than just 2,000 voices in a district where we could have potentially had 150,000 voices. So I do, you know, I'm sure I had this trepidation last time we went through it, that I feel like we all need to constantly remind ourselves that, gee, great that 2,000 people responded. Gee, bummer that only 2,000 people responded, and that we have to make sure, while I appreciate the ranking and comparison you did, and it was helpful, that it's only 2,000 voices. And all of us need to bring to the table our wisdom and experience and not rely just on this checklist. That being said, I agree with all of the changes you've brought forward. I do think, I love how Jenny spoke about diversity. I do think, as a future conversation, we've kind of gone overboard in how many times we say diversity and the ways we say it, and I don't think it's really as accurate a portrayal as the language that Jenny just used. And I would much rather see a statement
Yeah, I'd like to capture that.
that, you know, we could go back on the tape and take what Jenny said and put it in there instead of the 4 times we use diversity in bullets.
Sure,
So that's
maybe I'll
what,
look to Sandy to shoot us some language.
That's what I would propose, but I'm not wed to that. I just think it's the spirit. If we don't put it on the paper, it's certainly the spirit we should use when we're evaluating candidates.
And that's what I was going to say. The board has heard each other's comments about that. You all understand that. You will know what it means. Diversity is a positive force. You'll think of Jenny, but if we can put that in some other language, we would be glad. We'll try to do that.
Okay. Anything else, Lane? Okay. Who wants to go next? Lori?
Sure. Ken, I like the way you said earlier that we have our goals and our job description, which is not reflected in this. It sort of is. I mean, when you talk about the achievement gap and student achievement and then school climate. So I think we've talked here about student achievement and the gap, but not about the school climate. It feels to me like we might be even a little bit more specific. But you're also have the job description as well, right? Rather than just this document when you're talking with people. So they need to know that improving school climate is a value of ours.
Yes.
So I don't know that it necessarily needs to be included in here. It could be, but I don't think it's required. I mean, I'm just not quite sure what I think about it. I'm just saying I don't see it here really clearly stated. There is one thing that I would suggest adding, and that's an individual who exhibits, and I just did this really quickly so it's not written well, but I think it's a commitment to his or her professional development and one who models learning. I mean, we're an educational organization and that's what we do, and it's great to have it from the top. So, I don't know how we feel about adding something else even at the last minute. I didn't hear a lot of it, or see it even in the comments, but some of it is about change, some of it is about willing to take personal risks, but also it's about learning, and that's what we do. So I like somebody who likes ideas and is willing to talk about things.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I think that as we come back and work with you as a group on our pre-interview workshop, that we really ought to think about that specific point. We definitely want a person who's a lifelong learner, who shows some flexibility of mind, and that's something to blend into our perceptual screen as we're doing that. And I think that's a truly important point. And as we dialogue back and forth, I think we'll have some other points that are similar to that that'll come out beyond just the document. So thank you for that.
That's it.
Okay. Leslie, did you have a chance to? Okay. So we've gone around. All right, I'll put my 2 cents in, I guess. I actually think most of the changes to this are fine. I was actually initially very disappointed in the dropping of this business about every student can and will learn at high levels. But I understand kind of the issues that I believe I heard from the community, and I think as long as we add the high expectations for all students, I think that captures, it's really that high expectation.
Exactly.
That I think seems to be a little more goal-oriented than this business about learning at high levels. So I think as I've thought through that, I think I'm very supportive, in particular, of adding the high expectations for all students and personnel. As I went through a lot of the comments, it was interesting that for every, and I think a number of people have already observed this, for every person who said we absolutely have to have an experienced educator, there was somebody who says we definitely don't want an experienced educator, we want an experienced business person. And for everybody who said, man, we want more site-based management, there was somebody else who said, that's not working for us, we want more central control.
Yeah.
But as I went through this, I think both the data and many of the comments really agreed on some really key areas that I think are very important. That's this business about integrity, honesty, fairness, and I would add to that openness, this idea of really, telling it like it is. And I think student focus came out of this. There's a lot of these bullet points sort of deal with that a little bit, but it's this whole idea that that we're about meeting the needs of all students, and financial transparency and all that kind of stuff. They're important, and there are things that we want to do, but that's not what we're about. We're really about students and academic achievement, making our students successful in life. And so, those things, I guess, despite all of the bullet points, were the things that sort of came out to me as being both what I believe and having a lot of support from the community. But as I got into all this other stuff, I was trying to figure out how do we deal with all of these polarities. One person wants one thing, one person wants another, and I came to the idea that this is really about balance, that all these people have valid points, and I guess kind of what I came out of this, and I'm not sure that it really is stated in this, but it's this business about a team builder or an organization builder, somebody who can attract the best people, hold them accountable. These are all themes that sort of came up over and over again. Unite them around a shared vision, and distribute the resources appropriately. These are all kinds of organization building skills. And I think that as I look at what we did years ago, there was a lot about, I want my superintendent to be in my face, kind of. I want them in the coffee shops. I want them in this business about directly engaging all stakeholders or something, I think was the statement that we used. And I kind of see now we've really moved a little bit more to, we want a superintendent who can actually build an organization that can meet the needs of all of these disparate parts of our community in meeting the needs of our students. And so I don't know if maybe that's in this thing that you added, a strong understanding of organizational and educational leadership. But I guess to me, that's really a big issue because that encapsulates so many of these little details that came out of all the comments that we got. So I guess that's my overall thinking. I'm definitely supportive. Well, we've already talked about that. So, so any other comments?
Can I support what you just said about a superintendent who can build an organization? Because I've thought about, it's come up twice tonight. Leslie, you raised it once, and I think somebody else did. The balance that we need to find between central authority and site-based control. And I heard that come out in some of the discussions too, some concern about that. And I think it's not that people want everything to be the same at every school. I think I think what people want is an organization where there's consistent quality. That we like our differences, but we would like the quality to be the same. So I'd like to support what you're saying about somebody who can build an organization that's excellent from the ground up without necessarily being the same everywhere.
Right. Helene?
So I think, and probably Fred, you can follow up and speak to this. This is where maybe the people who participated last time could add some value. So I'm going to try. The conversation you're having now is the conversation we will be having when we start talking about interview questions and what we'll be looking for and how we'll do the interviews. And that is very distinct from the leadership profile. And so maybe it would be helpful to just back up a little and briefly explain how the leadership profile is used, what also will be given to prospective candidates, like the job description or the board goals. What does the packet look like? And then we need a way to capture the thoughts here tonight and bring them back when we have our pre-interview training where we work on, what are the things based on all of this, what are the things we're really looking for and how are we going to get to that in the interview? Because I think we are diverging away from what's helpful to have in the profile just a bit. So do you want to just...
Well, although I would say that I've picked up some language here, and maybe I could try to summarize it and then move to answer your question or your probe directly. So what I have at this point is that we're going to look at some language on item number 2, diversity as a positive force, on what board member Jenny had stated. Secondly, we're going to look at openness of mind. I believe it's the 4th one down, fairness, honesty, integrity, openness of mind in that one. Third, we're going to look to your actual policy language on the very last bullet about respect for gender, ethnicity, and those characteristics. And then I think that was the ones that I had. Is that 4? Now, I think that Board Member Jones is exactly correct, that we need to be a little careful not to drift too far away from the salient piece we're discussing tonight. But all discussion is good discussion. And it kind of illustrates how this all blends together. When we had our one-on-one conversations, we talked about what were our joys, what do we want to see nurtured and growing. That leads to kind of concerns, that leads to characteristics. Well, the leadership profile is kind of the same thing. We could really talk and discuss on infinitum. I think we're very close to a complete document here. Now, how will that document be used? It's used by the two of us as I said back in the beginning, as kind of a perceptual screen. It filters, and it gives us a screen to look through to try to ferret out from that constellation of candidates out there which person really fits the needs of Boulder Valley School District as determined by you in the end, because it is your responsibility. And what we'll be doing is we will actually be constructing a structured interview that we will be screening 13 to 16 individuals. based on how that turns out. Now, not on a strict score. We do a scoring procedure, but not strictly on a strict score. That will help, and then reference checking and other things that we do. That will help to determine the semifinalists that we bring forward. Before we bring the semifinalists forward, we'll be having a workshop with you to discuss procedures and procedures and how to ask questions and what to look for. So we'll be having this kind of similar discussion again. I know from experience that the set of questions that I bring into you as our suggested questions that each of you take responsibility for asking will not be accepted by all of you. And that's great. We'll do our best to come up with questions, but then it's your responsibility to refine those and determine which questions you actually want to ask. And although I call that first semifinalist interviews that you have a structured, scheduled interview where you ask basically the same questions in the same order to each candidate, that does not negate the responsibility that you have to be thinking on your feet and asking other probes as in response to answers that the candidate possesses. So
I think another use of this document we're already seeing now, potential candidates that Fred would call or who call us, one of the first things they say is the leadership profile completed? Is it online? And this, they gain a richness of a feel for the district, what some of the issues are, some of the raw data that are part of this without an interpretation. We just bulleted what we heard and what the community engagement sessions had. All of that then becomes some of their background for the other research they do. We'll also hand out your annual report from November, along with the job description, and they do use
the Chamber of Commerce book on Boulder.
On Boulder, right? They do use. That's right. We're selling Boulder too, or the community,
The community,
not just Boulder. In
no,
fact, we're
no.
saying it's
absolutely, because
far larger
people
place.
begin to talk to us immediately about housing options and variability of schools and.
Yeah, so we use.
We're
the
very
whole
quick to point
context
out
of
that the district is much more than just Boulder.
But it is part of what then becomes a resource for candidates too. So it serves another function, not just for you to convey, but for them to learn. So it's been very, very valuable.
Okay. So what I wanted to do is to have an opportunity for everybody to kind of put their thoughts out on the table, but now I think we need to sort of bring this back in again. And this is on action because I believe last time we did, in fact, vote to accept this, and I think that's probably something we should do. Because of the time frames, it would be nice if we could adopt this tonight. I think in the course of the conversation, I haven't heard any really strenuous objections to anything that's on here. There was consensus around making a couple of changes about the diversity statement and bringing the respect and value into line with our policy. But maybe now's the time to just sort of do a quick go around and see, is everybody willing to accept this at this point, or should we call this to a vote at this point?
It would seem to me the appropriate thing, if it's an action item, is someone should make a motion.
Okay.
And then
It's already been made, so.
Okay, so
now do
then,
we
is
call
there any
the-
further, you call the question and,
All right, so in that case, I'm gonna, okay.
I
Couple more
still-
statements. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, the inclusion of all voices still bothers me. I don't know how to do that. And I think it covers it, the one below that covers it, so I would
eliminate that.
recommend that we remove that one. And I'd offer that up as an amendment to the motion.
It's the fifth quality characteristic down, positive, an educator who believes that positive change results from sound leadership based upon the inclusion of all voices. That concept is captured in the next statement under it that says an educator who believes that respectful consideration of all ideas and points of view must be honestly given. So.
All right, so if there's a motion, I guess we're in Robert's rules, which is probably the right way to bring this to closure. So there's a motion on the table. Does anybody want to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Sandy, would you call the vote on the amendment on the table?
Albright,
Yes.
Belleville,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Reed,
No.
Roberge,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so that's been That's been stricken. Okay, we'll go on to the next. Lori?
I have another friendly amendment that we take Jenny's conceptual changes and modify the language about the second bullet about diversity as a positive force. And we could use the language from
Yes.
that we've heard and
Yes.
discussed. So I make that motion.
Okay, anybody want to second it? Leslie? Okay, discussion?
I'm wondering
Blaine.
if, Lori, for the sake of time, if you would consider actually amending your amendment to reflect that we would adopt all of the changes that Fred articulated, all three of them, which would include the language about, that reflects our policy, so we could just move through this
I
quickly.
withdraw my motion.
No, you can edit, you can
And-
amend your
oh,
amendment.
I can amend my, no, I withdraw my motion.
Okay,
to
withdraw it
yours.
and make
That's
another.
fine.
I
I'll second that.
take Helene's advice and move that we adopt all three of those conceptual amendments that you suggested. One, on diversity being a positive force. Two, the policy change on our BVSD language on diversity. Is it diversity? Yes, on diversity. And what, the third one was about
I believe it was.
openness,
That openness of mind.
open-mindedness.
Yeah.
Okay, I make that motion instead, thank you.
Okay, who wants to second that? Okay, Leslie will second that as well. Any discussion?
Where did the open-minded one go? I'm just,
Would be fairness, integrity, fairness, honesty, integrity, openness of mind, and the courage to take personal risks.
thank you.
I guess I'll just speak in favor of the openness in mind. I mean, if we really want to do, I mean, if we really want to make real change, significant change, sometimes you have to feel your way through it. And I think a certain amount of flexibility is really important. So I really support that change. Jim?
So my only concern is voting yes on something and I don't see the language. Trust you, Fred.
Thank you.
But, one of those. How about this? And maybe this is just an idea. We approve the draft with these changes. And then it comes back next time as well, just so I can see it. Otherwise, I'm going to have a tough time voting on something that I haven't seen the exact language on. But this way, we approve the draft
Yeah.
with these conditions, and you're going to hit it, and if you don't, we'll just
Tweak it.
let
Okay,
you
we
know.
got a motion on the table, though, so we need to get that out of the way. So, the motion is to accept the three changes that we have discussed. Yes, Leslie seconded it. So let's call the question.
Albright?
Yes.
Belville?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Roberge?
Yes,
Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes.
okay. So, Jim,
To publish it as a draft.
I think what you're saying is let's make the changes and then bring it back for,
But let's not slow this down, because we know what we're talking about.
Well,
We just, I'd like to see it in black and white. Let's approve the draft
okay.
as this is.
And
But
I
let's
think
go ahead and put this back on
All right.
consent next time as a
Yeah.
final.
And I think the nature of the discussion is adequately reflected in the tape, that there's a consensus now to move ahead and utilize this for its intended purpose, but the final approval would then occur when you actually can see the actual draft.
All right, so.
Or the final approval
Now,
of the
keeping track of where we are in Robert's rules, we have now voted to accept those changes, right? Now we have to finally vote on this action item, which was the original motion. So we have a motion to, help me out here, Melissa, we have as amended by the previous emotions. So, any discussion on that? All right, take a vote.
Albright? Albright?
Yes.
Belville?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Roberge?
Yes,
Smith?
Yes.
Motion passes.
okay, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you, board members, great discussion.
Okay, our final item tonight on the agenda is the study item on the district performance plan.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. King, I'd like to talk to you at a very brief length about a document that you had a chance to look over. And I'd like to, since this is a plan that reflects some evolution over time. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how the kind of plan that we write has evolved since the last one that you've looked at in detail, and then tell you a little bit about what I think we've learned about what a subsequent version of this plan would look like, preferably one that we would bring to you next fall, in the hopes that you'll be willing to adopt the plan you have that you're looking at, or something relatively like that, given timelines we have for handing these in final form for this year to the Colorado Department of Education. So in terms of the plan that you see, what we've seen change with regard to audience purpose and authorship is that the document you're looking at is really meant to speak very well to an audience that is external to us and is responsible for making sure that we comply with various requirements, and that funds us to be able to do that specifically. Past plans, you might have noticed, are more succinct, and they have been more written for an internal audience to convey what it is that we're working on and that which is most important. I believe that walking across past documents to the one that we have here, you'll see all of the same kinds of patterns in the data, though maybe some more, and maybe some patterns spelled out in more detail. But the basic message of achievement that's high and gaps in growth that are very, very troubling, and positive movement with regard to climate is, I think, here actually still. I think you'll also see some discussion of what the most important patterns are and what we believe some root causes are related to those, as well as some actions that is meant to speak as much as possible directly to those root causes. What you will see too is that some of those are now framed in language that is more explicitly meant to meet requirements of grants overall. And I wish at this point to very heartily thank Bea Wawalczyk, our grants officer, for all of her work in authoring this document, so that it will support very, very well the receipt of millions of dollars in grants over time, many of which will have very explicit requirements about if you are asking for money for a certain Title II purpose, it needs to be reflected in the plan that you have. Having said that, I'd like to highlight, I think, just 4 things that I will learn in evolving this plan over time, whether you choose to have us attempt to evolve that before your April meeting so that we can meet a requirement for an adopted plan by the board at that time, or in the next version of this, which I would hope to be fall. One of those is the timeline, and that is that fall is a better time to be bringing this plan on. While there are some substantial advantages to having done it the way that we have, that is, we have been able to hand a draft into the Department of Education. We have been able to receive positive feedback and affirmation that we have met most requirements, needing to add only a little bit of detail around progress monitoring for English language learners and how some money is actually expended. An advantage to having brought this to you in fall would be that we would gather more input at that time, and we could bring it back later if we needed to based on feedback that we have. That would also give us a chance to get comments from our district accountability committee in a fall time frame, and therefore have a greater chance to reflect changes over time. A second piece is that we would plan to learn from what other school districts have done in terms of the plans that they've written in what is still a relatively new process overall, and see if ours ends up striking a very good balance as far as the amount of detail and the way that we've organized it, or if there are equally successful other models that perhaps speak a little bit more to focusing at a higher level perhaps than some of the detail that we have, knowing that we will keep the detail at least elsewhere because it's important to track what we're doing over time. A final, next final piece, I think, is that we will need to keep enough detail to be well supportive of the grant activity that we have, and I'm hopeful we'll again find a balance the right way. And finally, one of the ideas may be to simply highlight what in a plan like this is genuinely new, and to the extent that we have discarded strategies over time or modified them in some particular way, point out what those were so that the plan has more of a feel as opposed to, this is a very long document, I'm glad you provided me with a 2-page summary of the high points, if I want to read it more, I can see what has changed and evolved over time, what represents strategies that we've been working with well and feel that or have evidence for we're getting good results over time, and what's genuinely new based on the work that we have. So with that said, I welcome any questions you have about the plan, be it about the format or the content or even the data behind it, if you like that as well.
Board members. Jim.
I would just like to add on to Jonathan's presentation. The DAC, when they reviewed this and went over it, you'll notice they have an attached thing in the back. I think I would call attention to this board. A couple of things aren't necessarily directed at this plan, but they're probably possibly directed at us and for us to think about. And one of their recommendations was narrow the goals, less is more. That's not related to this plan. I think that's on us, so that we can ask them for clarification, and as well as their focus on closing the achievement gap revolves around growth and not the absolute CSAP numbers that we've been doing. DAC has been having that conversation for years, so again, that's probably on us next time we set our goals. Otherwise, I think the DAC was very pleased with what they read and had generally very constructive comments that Jonathan's already just reflective listening. I just heard him say back of what changes he's going to be making in the next process. So.
Right, we didn't have the growth model back when we wrote those, and we knew that there'd be a transitional period, but I think you're spot on.
Other comments or questions? Tom.
So let me, just so it's clear to me, understand. So CDE has required a new template, right?
Exactly.
And so what we've done is also, besides putting it in a new template, we've also folded in our goals that we have, right? So does this, and Ellen, maybe you can comment on this, de facto become our district's educational plan?
I think so, but I guess I don't see that it changes the work that we do. I think it changes the container in which we hold it.
Yeah, and it may mean that we eventually end up thinking about how do we try to name things the same way in both of those plans overall, so that when we, for instance, I mean, a common phrase as a major improvement strategy is response to intervention. That appears very prominently in both of these pieces, and it would appear prominently too in the focused 2012 work that you've seen in the past. 2012 isn't here quite yet, but we're well on that. What you would have seen more of, though, in that focused 2012 work is phrases around the curriculum essentials documents that aren't quite as prominent in this kind of plan, that focuses more on very explicit needs that are spoken to in certain kinds of funding requests that we make.
So this kind of reflects what we're doing, and is this, I mean, I guess the point is it'd be nice just to have one plan, and make sure it's all coordinated, and then where we take that as the foundation for how we put our resources against it.
Yes.
We're in a budget planning session right now, and we say, here's our plan, here's our resources we have to put to that, how do we close that gap?
Right, I agree. I think our previous document has been aligned to the process we used to get it, which are our TIES goals, and it was a TIES process. But I think we can integrate it very nicely with this and have one document.
Yeah, it'd be good to have one document
bet.
that we're all,
Yeah.
that we're all clear on. And my one last comment about some of the goals in terms of SMART goals, or do we really believe these are attainable goals? And some of these we put down. From our performance, what we did last year and our plan last year, I asked Jonathan to send it to me. I told you I was going to answer you this question, right? Were we able to achieve, what we set out for last year in terms of our goals? And based upon that, what do we need to do different? Or do we need to look at the goals we've set and say, are these really attainable?
So that's a multi-layered question.
I know.
Let me answer a couple layers, and then if you'd like, we can talk a little bit about some things that we have changed over time, depending on the pleasure of the board. So we do need goals in multiple areas in order to meet the kinds of requirements for how grant work does, how grant work works best. I've tried to set goals that are, each one of them individually is a reasonable thing to aim for, but when you have many, many dozens, I recognize that we're not going to make many dozens of goals. In some areas, we are making real strides in terms of the improvement that we're making. I think about dropout rate. I think about climate. In other areas, such as the growth of students with students who are served through an IEP, students receiving meal assistance, students who are English language learners, and students who are Latino with a home language of English, we haven't made gains in the growth that they've made. So I recognize that any goals we're posing out there are challenging goals over time. When we make goals, we have influence on schools to focus on the goals they can focus on in their own time. But all of our elementaries can't focus simultaneously in the most meaningful way on reading, writing, math, and science, and PE, and art, and so we would recognize that whatever we would ask schools to gain, that not all of them are working in that area. If they all make it, we're down to a third or something of that gain. So that the goal setting, I acknowledge, is there are many goals. It's hard to make all of them, and we hope to make progress on them overall. But that now, finally, I believe you'd asked about what we've changed in this plan over time.
Right. What worked last year or didn't
Sure.
work that we've folded back in and into our plan this year.
Sure. So I'd like to talk about one very small thing, and then have Deirdre come talk a little bit about some bigger work at the middle and high school level overall. So one thing that we end up seeing with some of our grant work is we run a pilot, and it's relatively small, and we don't necessarily see data that lines up perfectly as this is working in each of our schools overall, but we do get some positive feedback from the folks implementing the plan, and we can point to some places where we see gains overall. Right, so we take a modest scale improvement like Galileo, one content area, math, elementary and middle level progress monitoring tool over time, and we see some promising implementation of that. And we basically this year we've very much scaled that up. Will we see as promising results this year? I don't know, and we'll see how that goes over time. That is something that's funded in here. I can fold that into a number of our overall strategies, but that would be one way to think about changes that are relatively small. Deirdre, would you like to talk about?
Before we get into too much detail on this, I think we got to be careful about what we're trying to do here tonight. You're presenting us this plan because next meeting we're going to be asked to vote on approving it, right? So the question is, we can evaluate this plan in many future meetings. The question is there anything about this plan that any of you identify at this point that would say this has to be changed before we bring it back for our approval? Or is this plan basically acceptable to everyone as the first shot in a brand-new way of doing improvement plans for a district. So let's answer that question first. Helene?
I think with the caveat that this is the first time we've had to do this, and we're basically taking other structures and trying to work here, I'm comfortable with approving it. I am very appreciative of the comments Jonathan made of all the ways this could be changed, and I support changing them. And if in fact we're gonna move, which, you know, what a thought, we'd have one plan, sure needs to be a lot more accessible than this is. I mean, if it takes a day to get through a plan, I don't see how we expect our employees and our leadership to subscribe to it. So I do think, given those caveats, I am totally comfortable with approving it. And I look forward to how Jonathan can spend the entire summer making this better.
Jenny?
And I'm willing to approve the plan too. My thought when I was reading this is, wow, this is a lot for the board to look at 9 o'clock at night. I mean, there's material in here for, okay, there's material in here for. In the morning it's a lot. Yes, no, but it's, a lot of it is things the board should be looking at, so there's material in here for a number of board discussions, which I hope we will, this is sort of a note to the agenda committee, which I hope we will be having, rather than trying to, and the agenda committee will be able to chunk some of these issues for us so that we can have multiple discussions about a lot of the things that are in here. That would be my wish, but I can approve the report.
Okay. I guess I'll add my 2 cents. You know, as I was looking at this, it occurred to me this is kind of a combination of our annual report, our superintendent performance review. It's our goal document, right? And I agree with Tom. You know, why do we have all of these different documents if this is really the essential plan for the district? Let's have one document. Let's make this, and let's not bring this to the board, you know, a month before it's due. We'll approve this one, but maybe the next meeting, and this gets to Jenny's, I think, point, the next meeting, and the meeting after that, and the meeting after that, we should start working on this plan so that we're all together on it, we understand it, because, you know, then we sort of, I'm struggling a little bit with Helene's comment. Yeah, we need sort of a summary that people can look at, but we keep asking for these RFIs, these kind of monitoring reports. How are we doing on these things? How is the district? And it seems to me it's all in this one place. And we ought to be looking at how do we make this a more central part, if in fact that makes sense. You know, maybe this is the central part of what we do as a district and as a board, is we start from the goals, and then we turn it over to you guys and let you work through the details. And by the time we're done, the board is already, you know, aligned with what we're attempting to do here. And we've got now supporting information from you that is in this document, and it's all in one place for everybody to see. I mean, maybe that's too grandiose a scheme, but there's probably some place in between that and having, like I said, the annual report and the superintendent performance review and all the other stuff that goes along with it. So, but I'm happy with approving this next meeting. Leslie.
Well, and my comment is, we'll have a new superintendent next fall. So presumably they're not going to come in and just, you know, demand change on every front, but there may be a certain thing that she would like to tweak, or he would like to tweak. So I think this is a good start. Let's approve it and have our discussions and see what the fall brings.
Okay. Everybody willing to bring it back on consent? Okay, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item is agenda setting. We talked earlier in board comments about the April work session. So again, apologize to all the people who were kind of involved in that, but I think it was very important for us to honor the Passover holiday and our own values around that. So appreciate everybody being flexible about that. Anything else that we want to talk about in terms of agenda items for future? See, we had one comment earlier, Jim. Do you remember what it was?
Pilots.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
I asked a question about History Day, but I think it's an RFI,
okay.
so I don't think it's.
And so it was really about time? I can't read my own notes.
Yeah, that was something that both Jenny and I talked about, but I'm not sure if it was an RFI or. I mean,
Okay.
it's a
All right.
It is a discussion about time. I don't think that's a immediate question, but I think it's one to put on the list.
Okay.
To schedule some time to talk about the issue of time. I'm interested in the research about time.
Okay, anything else? I need a motion to adjourn. Jim, seconded by Leslie. Any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. I know this is a long meeting, but it's the only one.